Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by Riley Frain, who does such great work over at the Portal Report and Mid-Major Madness. We're going to be chatting with him about the mid-major conferences that we're going to be seeing in action on Friday, how he's taking a look at some of the top mid-majors in the sport right now, a little bit on the Atlantic 10. We're going to talk about the Coastal Conference as well, and then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Friday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letter CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by Better. That is BETR on Better, who's making it all the better to be able to dive in on some daily fantasy by being able to give you $10 free when you go to BETR.app and type in the promo code of VSiNPod, VSINPOD. All you need to do from there is take a look at a player's stat line, determine whether or not they're going to go over or under it, and in jurisdictions where it's allowed, you're able to get in on some money lines and spreads as well. So they do a great job, and what we are going to be looking to do a great job of is deciphering this great game of college basketball. Let's take a look back at what we saw on Thursday, the first day of the year, try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
No ranked teams in action, but we did have some interesting results regardless, as Cal Poly, as an 8.5-point underdog late in the day, they take down UC San Diego. This by kind of 67-65. Not what you're accustomed to seeing with Cal Poly, as they only went 11 of 42 from 3, and UC San Diego cooled down from 3 as well, 8 of 32 from the outside. Alex Shulkin off the bench went 5 of 10 from 3, so that means that the rest of the team went 3 of 22 from 3-point range. As a matter of fact, if you look at the starters for UC San Diego, they went 2 of 20 from 3-point range, and on the side of Cal Poly was Hamad Musa, 9 of 17 from the floor, 26 big points for Cal Poly. They win the turnover battle by a count of 11-9. They play even up with regards to the glass, 44 rebounds apiece, so they do find a way to persevere, get the job done. Stanford looking to have themselves a good 20-26. They start off the year with a 78-58 bludgeoning over VMI, and VMI was up 36-34 at the half, and then the milk just went sour from there. Stanford 10-24 from 3. Linus Holstrom for VMI, just 1 of 10 from 3. Team as a whole, they go 7-32 from the outside. VMI also loses the turnover battle by a count of 10-8, so that was not very much what they were looking for whatsoever. And at one point in this game, VMI was actually up 44-38 in the second half. So if you do the math, that means that they were outscored 40-14 to end the game. So that was not great for them, to say the least. This was rock solid, though, as Oakland, they were down at the half to Youngstown State. They do find a way to persevere, 85-83, as they went 8 of 15 from 3-point range. They didn't do the world's greatest job on the glass. They lose the rebound battle, 36-32, but for Youngstown State, just 10 of 35 from 3-point range. And for Oakland, they were able to get 27 points out of Isaac Garrett to be able to find a way to persevere, get the job done. When it comes to top cover 8 teams in all of college basketball, currently number 3 on this list is Portland State, and Portland State needed overtime to get by Weber State. They were about a 1 to 1.5 point favorite, and they do so, 95-90 the final, and being able to send it to overtime, Jalen Henderson hit a 360 layup with like 2 seconds remaining. He had 34 big points in this one, and for Portland State, they scored 95 points with none of them coming off the bench, so that was remarkable. They go 12 of 28 from 3-point range. Weber State just 7 of 26 from the outside, and both teams were off at the free throw line. Both teams, had they lost this game, had nobody to blame but themselves. Weber State 29 of 42 at the free throw line, 19 out of 29 for Portland State, but Portland State does a solid job winning the rebound battle, 51-46, and it squanders a Weber State effort of Tejan Sani Jr., who was able to give the team 23 points. So Portland State now 8-1 against the spread. That is one of the best marks they're going to be fighting in all of college basketball. And this has been a great cover team as well. How about Idaho State now being 9-2 against the spread? And for Idaho State, they just absolutely run out of the gym. Sacramento State 97-84 the final. As for Sacramento State, Mikey Williams was able to supply 34 points, but he didn't have a lot of help around him. Idaho State wins the rebound battle 38-35, and Idaho State, a top 10 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, specifically in their home games, 14 out of 30 from three-point range, with Jamison Guerra being able to supply the team with 24 points, so that was a nice rock-solid winner. Tarleton State has been a really good cover team as well, currently 9-2 against the spread, but they upchucked a cover opportunity against Utah Valley, 91-85 the final. As for Tarleton, this was very much an up-down all-around sort of game, and for Tarleton, they were up 59-55 in the second half, and it looked like they were going to be able to get the cover here. They were down 1 point with about 50 or so seconds remaining, but late game fouling, that ended up dooming them. As for Utah Valley, they also went ballistic with regards to their overall shooting. They shot 55% from the floor and won the rebound battle 40-28. For Utah Valley, they do lose the turnover battle 17-9, but for Tarleton State, despite going 28 of 32 at the free throw line, they went just 5 of 18 from three-point range. Dior Johnson off the bench, by the way, 36 points, and you don't find it very often where the reserves score more points than the starters, but 55 of Tarleton's 85 points actually came off the bench in this one, so that was very intriguing. And Utah Valley looking to be a strong team out there in the WAC. West Georgia is looking to be a pretty good cover team as well. Bellarmine, by the way, 8-3 against the spread. The team that West Georgia took down 87-85 the final. And another team I was talking about a little bit earlier, UC San Diego, they now fall to 8-4 against the spread with their loss, but West Georgia 87-85 as a very slim underdog. They get the job done against Bellarmine, a Bellarmine team that went 29 of 50 from the floor. That said, they lost the rebound battle 38-33 as West Georgia had 18 offensive rebounds, just 5 for Bellarmine, always an issue for Bellarmine. And for West Georgia, how about Sheldon Williams-Dryden, one of the more underrated players in all of college basketball, 28 points, 14 rebounds. He was able to do his part to be able to get the job done for his team, and this has been another intriguing team, as this has been to the negative as we've highlighted some of the positive. Right now, one of the worst cover teams in all of college basketball, the Dolphins of Jacksonville, as they are now 3-9 against the spread, and by the way, in the same state, Florida Gulf Coast, now 3-9 against the spread as well. But first things first with Jacksonville, they lose to Lipscomb by kind of 76-57, and it looked like they had a pretty solid chance at a cover. They got down 10 at the half, and then they battled their way back in the second half. They were down 56-50 with about 8:40 remaining, and then they allowed Lipscomb to go on a 22-7 spurt to end the game. And for this Lipscomb team, they've been pretty solid in terms of taking care of the ball. In this game, they do turn the ball over only 4 times, and for Lipscomb, they didn't have a single player score more than 11 points. Was a whole is greater than some of its parts approach there. And for Jacksonville, they win the rebound battle 34-26, but they go just 7-24 from three-point range and lost the turnover battle by 11. And then for Florida Gulf Coast, they're now 3-9 against the spread because they lose outright to a Central Arkansas team that's actually been a really nice story this year, 85-83 the final. As for Florida Gulf Coast, they did a nice job from three-point range at 14 of 31 from the outside. Problem was they lost the turnover battle 10-7. They lost the rebound battle 32-26. And for Central Arkansas, they went 16 out of 20 at the free throw line and had Ty Robinson on their side. 27 points, 7 rebounds. Central Arkansas also shoots a little bit over 50% from the floor, so they find a way, even despite the hot shooting of Florida Gulf Coast, to be able to get the job done and be able to get that win. Also being able to get the job done was UW Green Bay, who's all of a sudden been able to cover some spreads. They got up 13-0 in their game against Purdue Fort Wayne, who's now just 4-9 against the spread. And for UW Green Bay, they get this win by kind of 72-54. As for Purdue Fort Wayne, 11 of 34 from three-point range. They play even up with regards to turnover battle, and they allowed UW Green Bay to get to the free throw line constantly. 23 of 25 at the charity site for Green Bay. Just 3 of 8 for Fort Wayne, and Justin Allen was your top guy for UW Green Bay in this game. He was able to supply the team with 21 big points. UW Green Bay looking to be getting on the right direction, and no team compares to the over like Denver. Currently, they are 12-0 to the over thus far this season, but Louisiana Monroe, with their loss to Southern Miss, they have now played all but 2 of their games to the over. So 11 overs to 2 unders, and for Louisiana Monroe, they do fall in this game in pretty good fashion, 87-73. They fall to Southern Miss. Southern Miss 8 of 22 from 3-point range. Southern Miss also wins the rebound battle, 46-24. For Southern Miss, they did have 17 turnovers in this game, but they also had on their side Talik Weeks, who was able to give the team 24 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. Did throw in their 5 turnovers for a good measure, but for the team, they do find a way to be able to persevere, so that was a good one for old Southern Miss. Another team has been very solid to the over thus far this season. How about what we've gotten out of Queens NC? 10 overs to 3 unders. They really have not been playing a lot of defense thus far this season, and for Queens NC, they do find a way to be able to get the win, and did so in very, very sweaty fashion, 91-89. They do not get the cover against Eastern Kentucky, as for Queens, they only go 5 of 24 from 3, while Eastern Kentucky, 14 out of 33 from 3-point range, but the Queens Royals win the rebound battle in royal fashion, 37-29, and for Queens, they had on their side 5 different guys that were able to put in there at least 11 points, and for Eastern Kentucky, only 5 turnovers in this game, so they were able to keep things relatively clean, but an Eastern Kentucky team that is typically known for generating turnovers forced Queens NC into just 6 of them, so that was intriguing. By the way, Florida Gulf Coast now 9 overs to 3 unders with their game against Central Arkansas today, and Oakland with their win over Youngstown State now 10 overs to 4 unders, so those have been some of the better overwhelming teams in all of college basketball. And your top under team right now in college basketball, that would actually be UT Arlington, and they do find a way to get the job done against Cal Baptist, 63-51 the final, as neither team was able to shoot in this game. UT Arlington, 5 of 20 from 3-point range. They shoot just 35% from the floor, but won the rebound battle 33-30, and Cal Baptist, 3 of 13 from 3-point range. They shoot 40% overall from the floor, and for Cal Baptist, just some sloppy play with regards to their offense. 17 turnovers to the 10 of UT Arlington. Dominique Daniels was able to supply 25 points, and the rest of the team at 26. They did not do a great job of helping him out, and for UT Arlington, 1 over to 11 unders thus far this season, so quite a sight to behold there, and this has been another team that has been able to cash you quite a few unders, as Cal Baptist is now 4 overs to 11 unders, so they're not too far off of that pace. This has been another team that has been good to the under, and it's not one that a lot of people would think of. It's IU Indy, because IU Indy played those very explosive games to begin the season. Now you've been getting like high 170s totals, and they played another game that stayed very comfortably under against Northern Kentucky. IU Indy does get the cover, but Northern Kentucky, they come back in the second half to win 81-72. It is a IU Indy team that has been slowing down, and they're not necessarily the best 3-point shooting team, just 10 of 31 from the outside, and they allowed Northern Kentucky to go 12 of 25 from 3. Not a ton of turnovers in terms of IU Indy in this game. They only forced 11 out of Northern Kentucky, and they themselves had 15, but they do find a way to be able to get the cover, and it feels like IU Indy starting to be figured out a little bit with regards to the style, which has led to quite a few unders, and this has been another team that's been pretty solid to the under. That would be North Dakota, as they have only played 4 overs to now 10 unders, and North Dakota, they do find a way to be able to get a nice convincing win over Oral Roberts, this by a count of 72-61. Oral Roberts has been really sloppy with the ball to begin the season, and in this game they actually won the turnover battle 14-12, but they went just 5 of 24 from 3-point range. Meanwhile, North Dakota, 7 of 16 from 3-point range, and North Dakota wins the rebound battle 44-32, as for North Dakota, George Nechavili was able to come in off the bench. He supplied the team with 19 big points. Those are some of the interesting trend teams that we're seeing right now, and then if you're looking at some Missouri Valley Conference play, Illinois State all over Evansville, 73-47 to final. They're looking rock solid out there, as they go 7 of 22 from 3, but they do a nice job winning that turnover battle by a count of 23-9. So Illinois State just night in and night out, they're finding different ways to be able to get the job done, and a team that has really sped themselves up is Cal State Fullerton. They take it to UC Santa Barbara 95-84 the final, and Santa Barbara goes 14 out of 34 from 3-point range, but they were sloppy with the ball. They lose the turnover battle 24-10 against a Cal State Fullerton team that wasn't generating a lot of turnovers coming into this game. And for Cal State Fullerton, Jefferson de la Cruz Monegro, 25 points and went 14 out of 14 at the free throw line to be able to get that one in. UC Irvine's odds out for the Anteaters. Win but no cover for them, 81-77. They do get the job done against Cal State Bakersfield. Irvine typically one of the best defensive teams on the road in all of college basketball, but they actually lost the rebound battle 39-32. This has been an uncharacteristically bad rebounding team for them, and they lost the turnover battle 15-9. But for UC Irvine, they also went 8 of 13 from 3 with Jerion Dixon, 26 points and 6 of 7 from 3-point range. So he was able to do a great job on that front, and this team was able to do a great job as well. Northern Arizona has been a pretty solid team to the under, and they did a nice job in terms of getting you that under. As for Northern Arizona, they are now just 3 overs to 8 unders. They do not get the cover, though, against Montana. 78-64 the final is Montana. 10 of 24 from 3-point range. They did have Money on their side. Money Williams, who only had 11 points, so not a Money-esque performance out of him, but they did a solid job in terms of being able to limit Northern Arizona to only 43% overall shooting for Northern Arizona, 7-19 from 3-point range, but they really weren't able to get any of their main men going, and for Northern Arizona played even up with regards to the turnover battle by a count of 13-13. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise, what we're getting in college basketball over the last 7 days, so pretty much since Christmas, we have been seeing a little bit of an overwhelming sort of trend. 94 overs to 91 unders, so a little bit over 50.5% to the over, and favorites, they're hitting at about 50.5%, 93, 91, and 1 against the spread. Overall for the season, the favorites are hitting more around about 50.8%, 1,117, 1,080, and 38 against the spread, with the over and the under being about as even as it gets. 1,111 overs, 1,110 unders, and along the way, I believe you've had like 24 or 25 pushes as well. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we're all getting trend-wise. Coming next, how about if we do chat it up with our good friend Riley Frain of Mid-Major Madness right here on Kennesaw St with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Kennesaw St with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It's always great to be joined by this man as we've got Riley Frain aboard. He does such great work over at Mid-Major Madness, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He's dialed into a lot of the teams that don't necessarily give the shine and the love that they deserve, but he does a great job in terms of being able to take a look at all of them. He also does a great job in the offseason of being able to keep up with all the happenings of college basketball over at the Portal Report as well. He's out there in the northeast part of the country, and you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at his first and last name, Riley Frain. Last name spelled Frain. And Riley, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Absolutely, Greg. Thank you so much for having me. That was quite the intro. I appreciate you following along with all my work and giving me an opportunity to hop on your show and talk about it to all your listeners and followers. And I'm looking forward to diving into some of the mid-majors. And from my neck of the woods, some of the top mid-majors across the country. It's definitely sort of my speciality, something I love talking about. So yeah, let's dive into it.
Absolutely. And how about if we start here first things first? How would you compare this year's crop of mid-majors to what we've seen in the past? Because I think that with last year's NCAA tournament, there was a big complaint of not necessarily a lot of great mid-majors other than McNeese. You really didn't have a lot of triumphs there. And this year, it doesn't feel like there's that necessarily like bona fide top 25 team in terms of mid-majors. But I certainly do think that there are a few teams like High Point comes to mind that I think can be very, very pesky. The Atlantic 10, certainly whoever comes out of there is going to be interesting. And I just keep looking at the Missouri Valley Conference conference. And St. Louis, for all the accolades and all the hoopla that Josh Schertz and Robbie Avila got over at Indiana State, it doesn't seem to have followed them over at St. Louis, but they just continue to dump truck teams on a night in, night out basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, to your initial point, Greg, maybe some of the top teams have been a little bit down this year. It feels like the Mountain West is a little bit more up for grabs. I know Utah State's doing really well over there, and of course, you always have teams like San Diego State and the West Coast Conference too, teams like St. Mary's. Some of the bona fide mid-majors, as you sort of mentioned, maybe not as bona fide as maybe we've seen them in past years, which, has maybe lended itself to sort of the mid-major crop being down as a whole. But I think the exciting thing that we've sort of seen this year is we've had a lot of maybe outliers, that teams that didn't expect coming into the season who have taken some big exciting jumps, and I'm sure we can dive into talking about some of them on the show here. But a couple teams that have really impressed me, you talked about the A-10, and I think, the top tier in the A-10 has been really exciting this year between St. Louis, George Mason, Dayton always really competitive. If St. Bonaventure taking a big leap, of course, VCU is always going to be in that top crop. And, even the middle of the conference is sort of impressed. I think Davidson has looked solid, although they sort of choked in their conference opener against Duquesne. But even outside of that, just some teams we really did not expect taking some exciting jumps this year. I think of Tulsa over in the American. I believe they are 13-1. I think of Belmont, who's had some success, really their lone big, loss of the non-conference session coming against Richmond. Even over in the MAAC, as you briefly touched on sort of there in your intro, a team like Miami, Ohio, really impressing. If I'm not mistaken, they only have one single lone loss from the non-conference session heading into conference.
No losses, actually.
Yeah, there you go. So one of the few undefeated teams remaining. And, alongside them, Akron has been really impressive. And Buffalo, I think, has been really impressive. So the MAAC sort of having, an up year as a whole, a single A MAAC, if you will, sort of an up year as a whole. So I think it's been really exciting. Maybe some of the top bona fide mid-majors, not as competitive, still very competitive. Teams like Utah State, St. Mary's, San Diego State, Yale continuing its dominance over in the Ivy League too. Some interesting teams sort of rising to the top of that pool as well, as I mentioned. Think of another team like Hawaii and even like Northern Colorado, who's had a ton of success in the non-conference under Coach Steve Smiley, and transfer guard Quinn Denker taking a real jump over the past couple of years. If I'm not mistaken, 2 years ago, he was playing JUCO or Division II ball somewhere and is now leading one of the top mid-majors in the country. So, again, just back to my initial point, maybe that top-tier crop is a little bit down. St. Mary's has picked up a couple losses in the non-conference, but to the flip side, some mid-majors we aren't necessarily super familiar with sort of taking some big jumps this year, which is always exciting.
Absolutely, and I know that we talked a lot in the offseason about the Coastal Conference, and that's one of those conferences I think is very interesting, because I was really taken aback by the way that William and Mary was able to take down Towson, as I like to say, America's favorite tag team with that regard. And we thought coming into the year that it was probably going to be between UNC Wilmington along with Towson, and both of these teams are still very rock solid, but Towson has started off 0-2 in conference play. We're going to be seeing them in action on Saturday, and Hofstra, a team that was able to take down Syracuse on the road, is very much coming to mind. Wilmington has done nothing to really hurt themselves. They've started off 13-2, so they're certainly doing their part, but I want to get your thoughts on this conference, because I feel like William and Mary and Elon have been two of the more pleasant surprises out there in the mid-major ranks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thrilled you asked me about the Coastal, one of the conferences I cover pretty closely here up in New York, with a lot of teams not too far from my neck of the woods on Long Island. Of course, Hofstra and Stony Brook being two very local to me. But yeah, I mean, looking at the top of the conference coming into the season, team Towson is 0-2 already with 2 losses. They just got upset.
They lost 2 conference games all year last year.
Yes, exactly. So Towson may be having a little bit of a down start here. And, I'm sure things will course correct over the course of the season. And really in the CAA, it's all going to come down to how things shake out in the conference tournament, which, if you look over the past couple of years, there's always been a really thrilling, exciting conference tournament with, lower seeded teams making deep runs and things like that. To that point, Towson having a little bit of a down start here. I know UNC Wilmington, you mentioned, is 2-0, but even they were a little bit shaky in their opener against Drexel. Look at Charleston, too, who I think was picked third in the preseason poll, and they've battled some injuries and were a little bit shaky to start the season. I think they faced Drexel as well, and I think we're initially losing in that game before ultimately pulling it out and coming back, and put up a solid performance against Elon as well, allowing Elon to score 81 points, as you mentioned. An Elon team that's really strong offensively this year. Sort of those top 3 teams between Towson, UNC, Wilmington, and Charleston being maybe a little bit down to start the year has to your point, Greg, allowed some other teams to kind of step up. I think William and Mary and everything they've been able to do under Brian Earl, taking a big jump this year. For those who are familiar with Brian Earl and the offense he ran at Cornell, it's sort of fast-paced, run and gun, a lot of fast-paced movement, and the conference has sort of struggled to adjust to that, and it's allowed William and Mary to sort of move into that top tier. And I think they were picked 4th in the conference's preseason poll, but I think they're easily a team that's going to contend in the top half of the conference now. And we've seen them start conference play in the CAA really strongly with a win over Towson, a marquee win over Towson really on night one of conference play, and then a strong performance against Stony Brook on night two. Hofstra, of course, like I said, close to home for me. They've got a couple high major wins on the year. They beat Quinnipiac, which will undoubtedly be one of the top teams in the AA MAAC this year, and then started off conference play by handedly beating Campbell. And I said this earlier on the Big Five pod, for those who are familiar with great coverage they do of Philadelphia basketball. On their CAA preview, Hofstra picked in the bottom half of the preseason poll, but Cruz Davis, their lead guard and lead scorer, and if I'm not mistaken, currently the top scorer in the CAA, picked as an all-conference first-team selection. And I had said back then that if Cruz Davis is going to finish all-conference first team, no way this Hofstra team finishes at the bottom half of the conference. And I think we're seeing that come to fruition right now. I mean, he's been an incredible scorer. He's getting a lot of help from players like Preston Edmeade, who's been one of the best freshmen in all of mid-major basketball, in my opinion. Biggie Patterson, who came over from Iona and is having a very solid season. Even a veteran guy like German Plotnikov, who I think has been at Hofstra for the past 3 years, has really sort of ingrained himself into a role there. And it seems like when they've needed a big shot, I think back to the game against Syracuse, German Plotnikov's kind of been the guy knocking it down. And so I see him as a guy who can play an important role for them in conference play. Asked me to touch a little bit on Elon as well, and their offense has been incredible. Briefly, I was reflecting on some of their KenPom metrics earlier, and they have the 68th ranked offense in the country, but sort of the inverse of that is the 326th ranked defense in the country. So an Elon team that can really run it up on teams offensively, and I think is going to give a lot of teams trouble, night in and night out in the CAA, is going to be a pretty consistent challenge. Again, the defense is going to be a little bit of a liability. Chandler Cuthrell, who for them has been incredible. I expect for him to continue to be, a really, really solid player, but he's a guy they're relying on pretty heavily. He takes up a ton of the possession. They've got a bunch of role players who I think are stepping into solid roles for them. I think of Randall Pettis or Juwan Jakar, Kasper Klotchak, who previously played at my alma mater, St. Joe's. All guys who are going to be really solid role players in the CAA, and I think that's only kind of helping Elon to take another step here under Billy Taylor. And maybe the last team I'll touch on that I think has really started conference play strongly here, and thus I think is kind of worth talking on, is Hampton, a team who was picked very low down in the preseason poll, does not rank very well in the national metrics. I believe they're bottom 250 in KenPom's rankings currently, but they just started out conference play 0-2, not only defeating Stony Brook, but upsetting the conference preseason favorite in Towson. Milwaukee Gaines Wyatt, Long Island native, so a quick shout out there, has been sort of their lead scorer and their lead contributor and carried them to that upset over Towson. A guy who I think could be really dangerous here in conference play, a mind for some stronger teams. Again, like a Towson who they just upset the other day. So just a couple teams to watch out for in the CAA. I think it's a conference that's looking really strong this year. I think it's going to be really competitive. Again, it's going to kind of come down to the conference tournament, as these one-bid leagues do, but watch out by the time we get to March, because I think you've got a whole bunch of teams here who, again, by the time we get to March, are going to be really competitive and all vying for that top spot in this league.
Oh, it's going to be a lot of fun to see what we get out there in the Coastal Conference. That is one that I think is going to be worth watching all season long. It's Riley Frain, who does such an amazing job over at Mid-Major Madness. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and taking center stage on Friday, we're going to have some very interesting conferences, as the MAAC with two ways. I always call it the MAAC. I think that's always the easiest way of calling it. We're going to be seeing a lot of them in action, and you want to talk about a conference that's up for grabs, the MAAC MAAC, that is certainly up for grabs. And then we're going to be seeing some of these mid-major conferences as well that are going to be coming to the forefront as well. We're going to be able to get some Conference USA action, which is always a little bit of fun. The NEC, which I know that you cover greatly. And what do you have your eye on with regards to Friday? Because I do think that those Metro Atlantic teams are very interesting, especially with Manhattan, a team I had very high expectations for coming into the year. Just felt like they really flailed without Will Cinder to begin the season, but they're starting to rise up, and they take on a Quinnipiac team that, if I were to look at things right now, I would say that they have to be the favorite, in my opinion, to win this conference.
I'll be at that Quinnipiac Manhattan game tomorrow, so I'd love to start there.
Nice.
I mean, yeah, you pointed to sort of the two big storylines in these teams. I don't know what's going on with Wilson Dorr. He's there warming up with the team. Not quite warming up, but he's there with the team ahead of every game, sitting on the bench on the sidelines. He's not quite injured. It seems like maybe, an eligibility issue or a grades issue or something of that nature. I think there's been some rumblings and talks that he's going to come back, but at this point, that seems like all it is kind of rumblings and talks that he might be coming back. And we're getting pretty late in the season here. I think they're going to start having conversations about, him having a red shirt and stuff like that, and hopefully coming back next year, albeit, with everything that goes on in the transfer portal, there's always a chance that doesn't happen. But I think they were lucky to return him this year, so I'm interested to see kind of how that plays out. But, I'm starting to get a little doubtful that he returns this year. And to your point, Greg, that makes this Manhattan team a little bit disappointing. They've still got some incredible scores on this roster, and to that point, they've started 2-1 in conference. So certainly not poorly, but just a 6-8 record overall, which is a little disappointing. Coming off of back-to-back wins over Presbyterian in the non-conference and then back to Rider in conference. Again, they've still got some talent on this team between Jaden Winston, Devin Dinkins, Fraser Roxburgh, big man from Australia, coming providing some solid minutes for them. And they've had some other guys step up too. So a very talented Manhattan team, even if they don't get Will Cinder back. But coming up against Quinnipiac, you mentioned it, Greg. Probably a favorite in conference right now. They I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're the only team in conference with a high major upset this year, a 10-4 record, already 3-0 in the MAAC. They just recently battled tough against that Hofstra team we just spoke about that, I think is one of the premier mid-majors in the country. And unfortunately came up a little short, but a game I covered and it was really close all throughout. And just guys like Amari Monroe, really talented, probably in the conversation for Conference Player of the Year again when it's all said and done. Jaden Zimmerman, who's really taken some strides here as a sophomore, and he's battled a couple injuries this year, but when he's healthy, him and Amari Monroe, between those two with this Quinnipiac team, I think is unmatched in talent. On top of that, I've had a handful of other guys really step up into key roles for them, sort of beside Monroe and Zimmerman, like freshman Keith McKnight, Sim Jones, Grant Randall. I feel like I could go all day talking about this Quinnipiac team, but Quinnipiac going on the road to Manhattan, it's always a tough place to play. I'm hoping we'll get an exciting game here, but I'd have to imagine that Quinnipiac starts to run away with it. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But a lot of interesting storylines going on there. Another game I'm maybe excited to watch, keep an eye on, has to be Iona Siena. I mean, if Quinnipiac is the number one at the moment, I think Siena is pretty easily the number two as it currently stands. Jerry McNamara has this team 9-4 and 2-0 overall to start league play. Sophomore Gavin Doty returning was a huge deal for them, but Justice Schultz too coming back. I mean, he's been phenomenal. Brendan Coyle back for another year. A lot of returning talent, and they only added to that in the transfer portal this offseason. I've dealt with some injuries too. I know Tasman Gudrick, who came in from the transfer portal this offseason from the D2 level, was solid for them and has dealt with some injuries here and there, but is averaging like 10 points per game and 7.5 rebounds. And so when they have him, they're a little bit of a stronger team, and I don't necessarily have any word on his current standing, but just a guy who I think is really impactful when he's in the lineup. They're going to visit an Iona team that's started conference play a little rough, just 1-2. I think they've had a little bit of a tough schedule, if I'm not mistaken. The 2 losses in conference so far, and on a trip to Mount St. Mary's, always a tough place to play. They opened conference play against Quinnipiac, who, again, I think is the outright favorite in the moment. So tough way to start conference play, but I think this is an Iona team that's really strong under first-year head coach Dan Giroux. 9-5 currently overall. They've got a ton of talent between CJ Anthony, Toby Harris. I mean, Lamine Sabali has to be one of the most athletic, all-around, dynamic players in this conference. I think that's going to make it a tough test for Siena on the road. 2 teams I'm really excited about seeing what they can do. And 2 teams I imagine will, Siena I think is sort of a top 3, top 4 team in this conference if you're asking me at the moment. But, Iona I imagine is going to be a little bit more toward the top half of that conversation too. I think the NEC as well. I think the marquee matchup there, Greg, has to be Central Connecticut visiting LIU. Unfortunately, I couldn't make my way over there. I'm going to try to get over to Brooklyn to watch the Sharks. But just a really talented team. I mean, you look at the Sharks non-conference resume, and maybe not the best record overall, but I mean, if you look at the body of work, just even from the past 2-3 weeks.
Held in there against Mississippi State.
They battled against Mississippi State. They went about 30 minutes strong with nationally ranked Georgia down there on the road. So, back-to-back games battling in the SEC there. I think this LIU team is really talented. They handled an A-10 team like LaSalle earlier this non-conference season too. I think if they're not the outright favorite in the NEC at the moment, they're going up against the number 2 in Central Connecticut State. Potentially the number 1 and the number 2 coming into NEC conference play here. Central Connecticut beat Boston College not too long ago in their non-conference stretch, which was their first high major win in a couple of years. And obviously a pretty big deal for a program out of the NEC getting a win against a program like Boston College, high major power conference, all that. 2 of the premier teams in the NEC this year. Again, if LIU is not the outright favorite, it's CCSU is right there behind them. And I think that makes this probably an incredible matchup to kick off NEC conference play, which is really exciting. A bunch going on with Conference USA. Delaware's been a little bit down, but I'm going to go try to get a look at them in the next couple weeks, and thankfully they get a home matchup against Jacksonville State to start things. 2 really exciting programs there. Obviously, Delaware's sort of getting its first taste of Conference USA action, this being year 1 for their program. So interested to see what they could do. I know they've had a bit of a rough start to the season, but I like Martin Inglesby as a head coach, so I think that makes them an exciting program. New Mexico State is playing. I don't have the game right in front of me.
Against Florida National.
Yes, there we go. Florida International team that I think is having a decent year, is pretty exciting, but New Mexico State I think is really impressed. 8-3 in the non-conference. I look at a guy like Jamel Jones, who transferred in this offseason, continues to just be such a dynamic scorer wherever he goes, whatever level he plays at. averaging more than 15 points per game. And they have a guy like Julius Mims, who has struggled a little bit of injuries, missed a little bit of time this year, but he's transferred in from Idaho, and he's only taken an even bigger step for them in Conference USA this year. Team that I really like out of that conference for sure. I look at Louisiana Tech, who always so physical, so tough. I think Talvin Hester is a really fantastic coach. I had the opportunity to talk to him last offseason just about his work in the transfer portal and some of the dynamic guards they've been able to bring in over the past couple of years, and playing with a little bit more size, but still sort of with that tough bulldog mentality and tenacity. And I think that's going to make them a force in Conference USA. Just again, another really exciting conference that is starting to get conference play underway here. I think there's a lot of good storylines. I know you mentioned FAU briefly there too, and they started off 0-1. There's a lot of talent on that roster as well. Corey Stevenson, who transferred in this offseason, and Zawade Jackson, who not too long ago was the best scorer in all of Division II basketball and is starting to climb his way into a pretty consistent role there for FIU. So some exciting matchups there. I'm looking at maybe LA Tech versus Middle Tennessee as one I'll keep an eye on. Definitely probably UTEP versus Missouri State. I think Missouri State, I like the way they started conference play very strongly. So a lot of good storylines in Conference USA to keep an eye on, Greg. A lot of great storylines around mid-major basketball.
It's going to be a lot of fun. We've got ourselves so many great games that are going to be going down both on Friday and on Saturday. And I always have a warm spot in my heart for the teams that play on Friday because, man, when you get 100 billion games on Saturday, I think that you would agree. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to be able to take it all in, and you wish it was spaced out a little bit more. So the fact that we get some Metro Atlantic, we get some NEC, Conference USA on Friday, that makes me very happy. Along with the Horizon League as well. Always have to give them a little bit of a shout out, and always have to give you a shout out, Riley, because you're doing such a great job looking at this amazing game of college basketball. You're shining a light on some of the teams that they deserve a little bit more shine, and you're doing a great job of covering it all out there in the northeast part of the country. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Absolutely. Just first off, thank you again for having me, Greg. Always grateful for the opportunity to be here to talk a little mid-major college basketball with you. Yeah, like you said, lots going on. It's always hard to keep track of it all, but getting a little bit of a taste of everything from coast to coast is always really exciting. Of course, got to stay tuned to your show here, Greg, for all the best coverage from coast to coast. For those listening, you can keep an eye on my work across social media, typically on Twitter or X or Blue Sky. It's at Riley Frain, RiLeyFrain. I do tons of men's and women's college basketball coverage. It's typically a little northeast, mid-major, and transfer portal focused, sort of the like of that. Like I said, I'll be at Manhattan, Quinnipiac doing some Metro Atlantic coverage, so excited for a big game there. But yeah, come check me out on social media, and just as always, thank you so much for having me, Greg. I'm always grateful for the opportunities to talk to you, my man.
It's always great to be able to get Riley aboard every single time he joins me. He lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So a big thanks to Riley for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Friday as we some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always a pleasure to be joined by Riley Frain, who does such great work over at Mid-Major Madness. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So big thanks to Riley for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Friday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at @GUnit_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas Station order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits on the rotation first. Those involve the bigger conferences, and then these are the games that are going to be at the bottom, the NEC conference games, along with the Southland conference games. So that'll keep things all nice, neat, clean, and easy, and with both divides, they go in time order. This starts with 8:33, 8:34 on the card. Florida International is going to be playing us to New Mexico State. New Mexico State is a 1.5 point favorite to a 1.5 point underdog, depending upon your book total, is between 153.5 to a 154.5, and it's at New Mexico State as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the small number. New Mexico State, very much a team that is built around defense, and it's a team that's not really going to be pushing a lot of tempo. They're right around about 266th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you do have a Florida national team that they are very content to gun it. They are about 26th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and when it comes to these two defenses, they're very opposites. As for this Florida national team, they pride themselves on being able to generate turnovers, and they've gotten better at being able to take care of the ball themselves. They're about a country average team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, to be able to win that battle a little bit more effectively, but a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for New Mexico State, they're more around country average, but New Mexico State last year was a top 10 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. We've seen a little bit of regression there. They had a rough game against Tulsa that really jacked up their numbers, but they're still 70th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you've got a Florida National team that they're more around about 165th, and for Florida National, it has been very interesting to watch them just really trust in the meet Roadrunners transfer, as you've been able to get about 18 points per game out of Corey Stevenson, throws in their 7 boards. He shoots 47% for 3, and team as a whole is actually a top 90 team in terms of their three-point shooting percentage at 36.5%. Julia Mackey, 39.5% three-point shooter, 13.5 points per game. Little bit of a top-heavy team, and a team that has been much better with their rebounding. Florida National now a top 40 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they have been having a little bit of a tough time with regards to when they get to the free throw line, knocking those down. They're about 300th in the country in terms of free throw shooting percentage, and this is a New Mexico State team that is going to be quite aggressive with you. They are going to put you on the free throw line as they're outside the top 300 in terms of free throws allowed on a per possession basis, but they do a nice job blocking down inside as well. Top 50 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, with just doing a nice job by committee with their rebounding, as Jamel Jones along with Julius Mims are your top guys. Mims 10 points, 7 boards, a block per contest, shooting 37.5% for 3. Jamel Jones also with the Meet Roadrunners last year, 16 points, 2 assists. He shoots about 35% for 3, and team as a whole shoots about 32% from the outside. With New Mexico State, they've been able to do a very nice job in finding a way to knife the ball inside, as they're a top 100 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range, and Elijah Elliott has been able to supply you with about 9 points per game. I do think that they find a way to get the job done, and I do think that New Mexico State is able to get a little bit more of their tempo in what should be a little bit of a sloppier game. Semi-total 150.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 2 with New Mexico State. 835, 836 on the card. Mount St. Mary's is on the road. They're facing off against Merrimack, and the Merry Men of Merrimack find themselves as a favorite of 3.5 to 4.5 points. 135.5 to 136.5 is the total, and for Merrimack, I did set them as a favorite of 5.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Mount St. Mary's just has so many turnover issues that they make them very untrustworthy, and you've got dueling styles here. Merrimack is looking to play very slow and controlled, 348th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Mount St. Mary's, a bit more of a mid-tempo team at about 143rd in all of college basketball. And for this Mount St. Mary's team, they have been one that has been okay with regards to like their perimeter defense and things of that nature, but what has really been killing them, they lose the turnover battle on both sides of it. For Mount St. Mary's, in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they are outside the top 280 in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, this is a Merrimack team that has taken quite a bit of a setback from past years. Usually this is a Merrimack team that finds themselves in like the top 15, top 20 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. This year they're all the way down to 70th, though I will say in their home games they're still generating turnover on over 23% of possessions. That's a top 40 mark in all of college basketball, but even with being a little bit more, shall we say, tapered off from past years, they should still be able to generate a bunch of turnovers against a Mount St. Mary's team that is currently, in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, hovering right in that neighborhood about 365th. They are dead last in the country in terms of taking care of the ball, and for Mount St. Mary's, it's a bit more of a whole is greater than the sum of its parts approach, as you've got essentially 5 different guys who give you between 9.8 and 11.3 points per game. Luke McKeldin, about 11.5 points, 6 rebounds per game. Justin Amati, 9.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. And as a matter of fact, out of your top 5 scorers, all but one of them, and Arlandis Keys, who's been really your main 3-point shooter at 35% 3-point shooting, 11 points, 3.5 assists per game. 4 other top 5, they do give you at least 5 rebounds per game. But even with that, they're still outside the top 275 in terms of percentage of their own missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Now, Merrimack going to get destroyed down low. They're outside the top 340 in terms of their overall rebound percentage, but KVR Kennedy along with Ernest Shelton have been able to combine for a little bit over 30 points per game. Kennedy shoots 44% from 3, but on very, very low volume. Merrimack still only shooting about 31% from 3, hovering right around 300th in the country with that regard, but if they can get to the free throw line, they knock those down. They're a top 35 team with their 77% free throw shooting percentage, and for Merrimack, they do a nice job taking care of the ball. They're a top 70 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and I do think that they're going to get a little bit more out of Todd Brogna moving forward. 5.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, comes over from Stonehill. It's been a little bit of a disappointment, and Andres Moreno was a really good 3-point shooter in the Atlantic 10 last 2 seasons ago. He He's given the team 10 points per contest, but only shooting 30% from three. Think he's doing for a bit of positivity, but think that the sloppiness costs you an over, so I might total 133.5. Like the under, and with Merrimack, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with them. 837, 838 on the card. Sacred Heart, they're on the road against Niagara. Niagara is a 4.5 point home underdog to this game, 143.5. Did set my line at 6. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. This is a Niagara team that just does not have a lot going for them. Niagara very slow and controlled. They're back outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, and you've got a Sacred Heart team that they're looking to push a little bit of tempo. They're about 144th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Big kryptonite for them has been the turnovers. They're about 289th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but this team has such a sizable advantage on the glass. Sacred Heart about a country average team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, which doesn't sound impressive, but Niagara 359th, and at home they're grabbing 11.1% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. When you consider that they shoot 29% from three-point range and are outside the top 275 with their own 2-point shooting percentage, that's not great. Trenton Walters has been able to give 10 points on 48% three-point shooting, but he's been dealing with injury. Justin Page has been able to give you about 11 points per contest, but he's shooting about 26% from three-point range, and Walters has been out pretty much for a month, so he's not going to be good to go in this game. And with this Niagara team, you've got one guy that gives you over 3.2 rebounds per game. That'd be Josiah Sabino, who's been able to give you 6 points, 4 boards, and he shoots 14% from three-point range. It's a team that's outside the top 200 with regards to their own ball security. They're outside the top 340 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and this is a Sacred Heart team that loves to go bombs away from three. They're a top 20 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three-point range. Deshaun Giddens and Quan Hill both give you 15 points apiece, and Hill shot over 40% from three last year, down to 22.5% this season. Should see a rebound there. You've got Giddens giving you about 38.5% three-point shooting. He's generating 2 steals per game. Niall Ralph Byer has been able to shoot 47% from three, 14.5 points per game. Jan Farrell shoots 44% from three with 10.5 points per game. And for Sacred Heart, even with their ball security issues, going against a Niagara team that really doesn't force the issue. And I will say for the Sacred Heart team, they themselves outside the top 290 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. We should get some open looks from three, but I just don't know if Niagara's going to be able to knock them down. I did set my total at a 144. 143.5 is my max buy point on the over, so in on the over, and I'm willing to lay with Sacred Heart. 839, 840 on the card. It is Fairfield. They are on the road against Canisius. Canisius is a home underdog of 4.5 points, 137.5 to 136.5 is the total, and did set a total of a 136.5. So 137 plus, I'm going to be in on the under, as you've got a Canisius team that is very, very slow. Out of 365 Division I teams, they are 364th in terms of total possessions per game, and in their home games, they're actually dead last in terms of total possessions per game. And for Canisius, last year, you had a 20-point per game scorer that was able to lead the way in Paul McMillan. This year, it's been a little bit more spread out, as your top scorer is Khalil Singleton, 11.5 points, shoots about 38.5% from three-point range. Canisius, well outside the top 270, turns points allowed on a per possession basis, as they are just getting plowed down low. With this Canisius team, they are allowing teams to shoot 57% on their twos. That's outside the top 330 in all of college basketball. To their credit, a top 125 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but the team is also shooting 66.5%. The free throw line, that is a bottom 50 mark in all of college basketball with their own two-point shooting percentage, bottom 20 in the country, despite the fact that you've got Michael Evabrow, who's solid down low, 8 points, 6.5 boards, a steal per contest, and then Brian Janja has been able to give 10.5 points, 5 rebounds per game. But on the flip side, you got a Fairfield team that they do a nice job in terms of being able to maximize their possessions. Top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They also struggle with their own two-point shooting percentage outside the top 300 with that regard, and they really don't get to the free throw line. But what this Fairfield team does, they grab second chances. Top 45 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Declan Wolfinger, along with Brandon Benjamin, they combine for 7.3 offensive rebounds per game and a total of about 18.2 rebounds per game. And between the two of them, about 25 points per game. Neither of these guys pop it from three, but Braden Sparks, 46% three-point shooter, 18.5 points. He gives you about 2.5 assists per game. This is a squad that doesn't really force a lot of turnovers themselves, but they've been a top 125 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, country average in terms of being able to guard the three-point line. I do think that they find a way to go out there, get the job done against a Canisius team that is very weak down low, and they just don't necessarily take care of the ball the same way that Fairfield does. So I do think that this is going to be a very slow and controlled game. So I total 136.5. I like the under, and with Fairfield, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 6 with them. 841, 842 on the card. Sam Houston State is on the road against Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky, 8.5 to a 4.5 point favorite. 163.5 is the total, and I made a total of 165. I do like the over. You've got two teams that are going to be looking to play at a pretty rapid pace. Sam Houston State, 41st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Western Western Kentucky even quicker at 17th. And for Western Kentucky, the squad has been able to do an okay job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances, 159th in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Sam Houston State, the 40th. They're grabbing 35.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Big reason why I'm willing to take the points with them. I did set my line at a 3, and with Sam Houston State, this is not the same three-point shooting team that they were a season ago, but they're starting to find their sea legs. They're right around country average, shooting about 34.5% from 3, with Kashi not being that main guy, shooting 45.5% from 3, nearly 2 steals, 12 points per game, and it very much as a whole is greater than some of its parts approach. How about 8 different guys between 8.7 and 12.2 points per game? The TCU transfer and Isaiah Manning is your top scorer, 12 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, and with the offensive rebounding that you get, you've got 3 different guys that do give you at least 5.4 rebounds per game. Damian Nichols, 8.5 points, 5.5 boards, a little bit over a steal per game. Not who I mentioned before is your top rebounder at about 7 boards, and Vakalo Ilic comes over from Loyola, Maryland, 9 points, 6 boards, really doesn't pop it from 3, but does a nice job holding down the fort. And then for Western Kentucky, this squad has been able to do a pretty nice job in terms of maximizing possessions, with the fact that they are a top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and top 40 team in terms of percentage of their possessions that end in a free throw. And they do shoot about 74% free throw line, a little bit above country average. That said, they're just not good with their interior offense, and the team is looking to pile drive the ball down low. They're a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2, but they're outside the top 315 in terms of that 2-point shooting percentage. Now, Tegan Moore has been able to give you more, 17 points, 6 boards, a little bit over a steal per contest, and then Armello Boone, about 1.8 steals, 12.5 points. He doesn't necessarily shoot it well from 3, but Ryan Myers does at 43.5% from the outside. Team as a whole shoots about 33% from 3-point range, and when it comes to this Western Kentucky team, they've been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to win the battle on the boards. They've been a top 175 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, but they really do give it up from 3. They're outside the top 225 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, and I do think that Sam Houston State going to be able to hit those outside shots, grab some second chances. So set my line at a 3. I'm willing to take the points with Sam Houston State, and I like the under semi total at a 165. A 43, a 44 on the card. Jacksonville St is on the road against Delaware, and Delaware finds themselves as a slim home underdog, as you're going to be catching with them between 1.5 and 2 points total on this game. It is 131.5 to 132.5, and I made Jacksonville State the 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number. You've got a Delaware team that is coming off of scoring less than 55 points in their last game against Missouri State, and for this bunch, their forte is 3-point shooting. Delaware is right now a top 40 team in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, 35th to be exact at 37.7%. That said, they are not giving themselves any sort of second chances. This Delaware team is right now grabbing 19.7% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is outside the top 350 nationally. Neither of these teams are looking to push any tempo whatsoever. Jacksonville State about 337th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Delaware 318th, and Delaware not the world's worst offensive team, about 199th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Jacksonville State, they're not quite the same outside shooting team that they were a season ago, and that does fall to about 29% 3-point shooting away from home compared to about 36.5% at home. But with Jacksonville State, they should be able to own the glass in this game. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, as I did set them as a 7.5 point favorite. Ray Harper's teams are just always very rock solid down low, and they're about country average in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but in my opinion, they've got the best player in this game, and Mustafa El Motakil comes over from Louisiana with about 18.5 points, 7.5 boards, only shoots about 30% from 3, but your ancillary scorers, Jacoby Hill, AC Bryant, have been able to both shoot over 40% from 3. Hill about 7.5 points per contest, Bryant 13.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Team is doing a nice job by committee in terms of rebounding, and for Delaware, they dealt with a few injuries to begin the season. Now they've got Justin Fernandez back in the fold, and since he's returned 14.5 points on 45.5% 3-point shooting, and McCona Emery down low has been able to give about 13.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. So he's been solid there for a Delaware team that's a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but they're outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. And for Delaware, just so much sloppiness with regards to their overall offense, as this is a Delaware team that has turned the ball over nearly 13.5 times per contest. If you look at turnovers on a per possession basis, this Delaware team is right now checking in about 312th in all of college basketball. Now Jacksonville State is a team that's outside the top 200 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, country average in terms of taking care of the ball themselves, but I think that the overall sloppiness of Delaware, coupled with the fact that Jacksonville State has been a respectable 3-point shooting defense, or a lot of teams who shoot 32% from 3, allows Jacksonville State to win this game comfortably. So my line is 7.5, willing to lay with the Gamecocks, and I'm in on the under semi-total at a 127.5. A 45, a 46 on the card. It is Marist on the road against St. Peter's, and the Peacocks find themselves as a home underdog. You're catching with them 3.5 points on this game, 128 after 129.5, and I set a total of a 127.5. I'm going to be in on the under as per usual. St. Peter's playing very slowly. 319th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Marist speeding up a little bit. 261st in terms of total possessions per game. Typically, they're more around about 300th, but this is still a Marist team that I recognize that they took a little bit of a lump in that game against Georgia Tech, but still, this is a team that's doing a very good job with their defense, and now they've been able to do a much better job in terms of generating turnovers. This has become a top 75 team in terms of turnovers force on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a St. Peter's team that year in and year out, they've always prided themselves in terms of being able to do a nice job on the glass, but they have a tough time taking care of the ball. They've been doing a better job being a country average team in terms of taking care of the ball, but all of a sudden, this has been a unit that has been giving up a lot of second chances. They are 333rd in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are grabbing about 35.5% of their misses as an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, you've got a Marist team that's more around about 112th, and for Marist, each of the last 2 years, they've been a top 10 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're not quite there, but still, they've been a top 100 team with that regard, and they've done a much better job in terms of guarding the three-point line. 16th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. I think that that's going to prove to be very costly for the Peacocks, as for St. Peter's, you've been able to get quite a bit of production out of Mr. Bland. Brett Bland has been able to give you 15.5 points, 3 steals. He shoots 39.5% from 3. St. Peter's only shooting about 31.5% from the outside, so they certainly have had their warts there, but for St. Peter's, they're all of a sudden a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three-point range, and that's prevented them from getting to the free throw line, which is a bad thing because they're a top 20 team with their 77.5% free throw shooting percentage. Now, for St. Peter's, they become a top 40 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they're sort of gambling for turnovers as they are now also outside the top 270 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. And with this Marist team, they're neither here nor there in terms of their three-point shooting percentage at 33%, but Elijah Lewis, 13 points, 4.5 boards. He's been able to do a nice job with his versatility. Justin Menard has become a nice go-to point guard, 11 points, 4 assists. He shoots 36.5% from three-point range, and it's just really by committee with regards to Marist on the boards, as you've got now 6 different guys that give you at least 3.7 rebounds per game. Only one guy with more than 4.5 boards, Jaden Daughtry, gives you 5.3 points, 5.8 rebounds, a steal and a half per contest, and with the way that Marist is able to generate a bunch of turnovers, the way that St. Peter's is as well, but Marist just being the more rock-solid defense, I do think that the Red Foxes of Marist do find a way to be able to get the job done in a slog. So I tell 127.5. I'm in on the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 5 here with Marist. A 47-48 on the card. It is USC on the road facing off against Michigan. Michigan is a 21.5 to a 22.5 point favorite, and your total is 168.5 to a 169.5. I did set a total here of a 164.5. I'm in on the under. Now, I recognize that this USC team is playing at warp speed. In terms of total possessions per game, they are 22nd. Meanwhile, you've got a Michigan team that they are very much looking to push some tempo as well. 12th in the country with this regard, and Michigan is actually your number one team right now in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Do you think that the number is going a little bit too far? I recognize that USC, for one, is going to have to deal with a lot of travel, and two, they're all sorts of banged up because now they're going to be without Rodney Rice for the rest of the season. That's not great, but Chad Baker-Mazara has been a nice edge. He suffered 21 points, 5.5 boards, shoots 36.5% from three-point range. They are going to be bringing in Cam Woods, who apparently was just chilling out, and he needed a body because I thought that he was going to be going to USC to start with, so now they're getting him back in the fold, and when he was over at Robert Morris last year, he actually did a nice job with about 15 points per game, but he's not really a guy that's going to light you up from three-point range. It could be a little bit versatile on defense. You've got Ezra Uzar, who's been able to supply 17 points, 6 rebounds per game, and USC, solid three-point shooting team. They're shooting 36.5% from three, and they're going to need to take quite a few threes because this Michigan team is a top 2 team in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now, what USC does is get to the free throw line. They're a top 10 team in terms of free throws attempted on a per possession basis. I do think that they're going to have a very difficult time patching up with the overall size that Michigan has to offer, with Ade Mara and Yaxel Lendeborg just absolutely controlling things, as Lendeborg, 15.5 points, shoots 40% for 3, 7 rebounds per game. Ade Mara, he's been able to give you a little bit over 8 boards, 2.5 blocks, 11 points per game. Morris Johnson is able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. These three guys are just so dominant. And then Elliot Kadu has really helped out with the turnover issues that really plagued Michigan last year. 5.6 assists, about 10 points per game. Michigan still does turn the ball over about 12.5 times per game, but it's much, much better than it was a season ago. And for this Michigan team, they're also allowing teams to shoot less than 30% from three-point range, while they themselves are a top 40 team in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. I think USC has the athletes to do just enough to be able to hold in there, and I do think that with regards to Michigan's defense, they're going to be able to do just enough to hold in there on the under, and I do think that USC is going to need to slow down just a little bit with all their injuries. So I did set a total here of a 164.5. I'm going to take a shot on the under, and I set Michigan as a 20.5 point favorite. So at 21 plus, we'll take those points points with USC. 849, 850 on the card. Iona is going to be playing us to Siena. Siena's a 1.5 point underdog total on this game. It is 146.5, and I did set Iona as a favorite of 4.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It's going to be a very interesting tempo war in this game, as Iona is currently 39th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Siena, they are 345th in all of college basketball, and for both of these teams, they've been very solid in terms of guarding the three-point arc. Siena is 43rd in the country in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. Iona is 60th, so I did set a total of 144.5. I'm going to be in on the under. What Iona has really been plagued by this season has been offensive rebounding, as this is a team that's just getting absolutely dump trucked on the glass. They're outside the top 300 in terms of percentage of their own missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, outside the top 280 in terms of overall rebound percentage, but they do have CJ Anthony on their side. 16 points, trio of boards. He shoots 39% from 3, and Toby Harris has been able to shoot 43.5% from 3. Big edge that Siena is going to look to exploit is the fact that they are better on the glass, but with the Siena team, they're also a team that has been very rough with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage, as right now Siena is shooting 27.8% from 3. That is a bottom 10 mark in all of college basketball. As a matter of fact, out of your top 6 scorers, you don't have a single guy that shoots over 33.3% from 3, and the 33.3% three-point shooter, Francis Falasic, he attempts 0.2 threes per game. Yeah, that's not great to say the least, but you do have Gavin Doty, who's been able to give you about 14.5 points, 6 boards per contest. This team has been pretty solid in terms of generating turnovers, a top 130 team in terms of turnovers force on a per possession basis, but they do leave themselves vulnerable outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, not allowing a lot of second chances. Siena, a top 45 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but Iona's not really relying upon those second chances to start with. You've had Tasman Goodrick, when he's been out there, be able to give you about 9.5 points, 7.3 rebounds per game, but he's been dealing with an injury for Siena. You have to figure that he's going to be out of the fold once again, and with Christian Jones, he's been a little bit of a disappointment in my opinion. Only about 5.5 points per contest. I thought we would get a little bit more out of him this season, and I do think that for Iona and Siena, they're both going to do a nice job in terms of guarding the three-point line, but with Iona just really not relying upon offensive rebounds to start with, and also being able to have someone like a Cosme Amakatu, who's been able to give you about 9.5 points, 5 boards, coming on strong down low. I do think that they're going to do just enough to get the job done, and this is also an Iona team that is a top 175 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So I did set my line here at a 4.5. I'm going to lay with Iona. I like the under, semi-total 144.5. 851, 852 on the card. Kennesaw St, we give our road to Lane Kiffin Go Owls. They are going to be on the road facing off against Liberty. Liberty is an 8.5 point favorite. 155.5 to 156.5 is the total line. I set a line of 10. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Now, Kennesaw State and Liberty, they play a complete opposite style. As Kennesaw State leads the country in terms of total possessions per game. Liberty 331st in terms of total possessions per game. Kennesaw State 29th in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They rebound 36% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Liberty second to worst in all of college basketball with this regard. They rebound 17.3% of their misses. Kennesaw State turn 88th with their three-point shooting percentage at 30.6%. Liberty 18th at 39.2%, and that goes all the way up to 49.4% at home. Now, that should see some regression. You've got a Kennesaw State team that is a top 85 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home, but Kennesaw State about 165th in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. Brandon Skip to my Lewis, been able to give you 11.5 points, 6 rebounds per game. He's been solid there, and Simeon Cottle is just a really good go-to scorer, 19.5 points, 3 assists. He shoots 44% from 3, while R.J. Johnson has been able to shoot 43% from 3-point range himself. This team by committee just does a really good job on the glass, as you've got Fraquan Sherman, who's not even a starter in most games, give you about 8 points, 8 rebounds per game. You've got, as a matter of fact, 6 different guys that give you at least 4 rebounds per game, but that's it for this Kennesaw State team. They have been outside the top 240 in terms of ball security. They turn the ball over 13 times per contest, and they've been very good in terms of their interior defense. They're a top 50 team in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, but with this Liberty team, they should be able to win the turnover battle. Not generating turnovers the same way that they did a season ago. They are outside the top 175 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on defense, but with regards to their offense, top 25 team in terms of maximizing their possessions. Brett Decker Jr., 18.5 points. He shoots 52.9% from 3. Colin Porter is shooting over 40% from 3 with 11 points per game, but the main man that really makes this engine go is a guy that doesn't shoot threes at all. That'd be 6'7" Zach Cleveland. As a point forward, 9.5 points, 8.9 rebounds, 7.8 assists, a steal and a half, and a block and a half per contest. Just an absolute stat sheet sufferer for the team. Xander Carter has come off the bench. He's only been able to give you 4 points per game. I think that he's going to heat up a little bit more, while Xander Yates, the other Xander, he's been shooting 44% from 3-point range off the bench. You just have weapons upon weapons for this Liberty team, and even though they're not generating for themselves any second and third chances, they also are a top 150 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. You're not allowing a lot of second and third chances themselves. I do think that that's going to be enough for Liberty to get the the job done here. I did set them as a 10-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and I think that's a little bit easier for Liberty to slow down Kennesaw rather than Kennesaw speed up Liberty. So set a total of 150. I'm in on the under. 853, 854 on the card. Quinnipiac is on the road against Manhattan, and Manhattan is a home underdog of 6.5 to 7.5 points. So last game, 157.5, and I set a total of 155.5. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the under. You've got a Quinnipiac team that is playing fast, but not warp speed fast, about 109th in the country. In terms of total possessions for Manhattan, pretty much the same pace. They're about 115th, and for Manhattan, this has been a ghastly defense outside the top 325 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. 312th in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and Quinnipiac has not been bad with their three-point shooting percentage defense. In a road/court environment, teams shoot 32% from the outside. That's a top 110 mark in all of college basketball, and it's a big reason why I'm willing to lay up to 7 here with Quinnipiac. You've got Amari Monroe, who had a little bit of a slow start to the season, started to heat up, 15.5 points, 7 boards. He only shoots about 24% from 3, but team as a whole is still shooting about 35.4% from 3. You've got Keith, give me just one more. McKnight giving you about 11 points, 5 rebounds per game. Jaden Zimmerman has dealt with a little bit of injury when he's been out there. He's been able to give you about 17 points per game, but we have not seen him in about 3 weeks. I think that he should be on the fold here, but in the interim, Asim Jones has shot 46% from 3-point with 11 points per game. Certainly, I do think that there's going to be a little bit of regression there, and Manhattan has been hurt by the fact that Will Sidner has just not been eligible all season long, so they've been looking to Devin Dinkins along Jaden Winston to really headline things in the backcourt. These two guys combine for about 29.5 points per game, and Winston shoots 42% from 3-pointers with 3.5 assists, 2.5 steals per game, and your top 3 scorers for this team, Winston, Devin Dinkins, throwing their Terrence Jones as well. They've done a nice job in terms of generating turnovers. Manhattan has actually been a top 225 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they are getting absolutely trucked on the glass. They are outside the top 350 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. You're allowing 14.7 offensive rebounds per game outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. And then Fraser Roxborough, he's been able to give you about 11 points, 6 boards. He only shoots 29% from 3 after last year. That was well about 40% from the outside for Manhattan. They're about 34.9% from 3-point range. That's a little bit above country average, but outside the top 280 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, I think that that'll be just enough for the under to hold. And Quinnipiac, even though they're dealing with the injuries in the backcourt, I do think that they find a way to get the job done. I'm willing to lay up to 7 here with Quinnipiac, and I'm in on the underside by total 155.5, 855, 856 on the card. Robert Morris is on the road against Detroit. Bobby Morris is a 2.5 to 1.5 point road favorite. 147.5 is the total. I did set a total here of a 141. I'm going to be in on the under. Robert Morris is playing at a very slow and controlled pace, right around about 292nd in terms of total possessions per game, and for Detroit, they're just not shooting well from 3. 241st in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They as a collective are shooting less than 30% from 3, and that actually goes down to less than 26% at home. TJ Nadeau, he's been the lone guy that's really been able to supply 3-point shooting, 13 points per game. He shoots 46.5% from the outside. And then you do have a go-to guy in terms of stuff at the stat sheet in Orlando Lovejoy, but one thing that he does and stuff is 3-point shots. He has not made one all season long, but does shoot 95.5% the free throw line, 12 points, 3.5 assists, a steal and a half per contest, so that's been pretty rock solid. You have a Detroit team that's really not going to be forcing the issue, and for Robert Morris, that's big for them because Robert Morris, in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they are outside the top 250 in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for Detroit, they are outside the top 310 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. But what is really going to be able to win out, in my opinion, for this Robert Morris team is their ability to be able to crash the glass and to be able to generate some second and third chances, as Robert Morris brings in Nicolas Chatakulis, who's been able to give you 7+ rebounds per game. It is a Robert Morris team that's about country average with regards to their overall defensive rebound percentage. So they're not great, they're not terrible in terms of preventing those, but that said, they rebound 37.9% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is 15th in all of college basketball, and the main man that has been able to help out with that, Deshaun Good, he has been Mr. Good. 14.5 points, 9 boards. He also shoots 63% per 3. We'll see a little bit of regression there, but Ryan Prather, the main guard that returns from last season's team, 13 points, 3.5 assists. He's only turned the ball over about half a time per contest, so I mean, the turnovers are getting a little bit better for Robert Morris. Do have to feel a little bit suspect about the fact that they only shoot at 67.5% at the free throw line. That's right around 300th in all of college basketball. Detroit, they're about 75%, so they've been a top 100 team there, but Detroit also outside the top 300 in terms of their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. I think that prevents an over and prevents them from getting the job done. I saw Robert Morris as a 5-point favorite. I'm willing to lay that number, and I'm in on the under, so I total at a 141. 857, 858 on the card. Middle Tennessee plays outside of Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech does find themselves as a underdog of 5.5 to 6.5 points. 132.5 is the total. I did set a total here of a 127.5. I do like the under. Louisiana Tech is playing as slow as molasses right now, 350th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And then you got a Middle Tennessee team that they're not super duper slow, but at the same time, they're only about 228th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And you've got a Middle Tennessee team that is not just doing much in terms of being able to grab second and third chances for themselves. For Middle Tennessee, in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, this team is right around about 170th in the country with that regard. Meanwhile, you've got a Louisiana Tech team that the one thing they have been able to do on offense is grab second and third chances. 36th in the country with grabbing 35.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, and they are going to need to grab a few more because for Louisiana Tech, this team is shooting 30.9% from three-point range. That is about 300th in all of college basketball. Now, one thing that they do really well, they guard the three-point arc. If you include their games against non-D1 teams, they allow teams to shoot 24.5% from three-point range. That is numero uno in all of college basketball. Middle Tennessee, they themselves have been really good at guarding the three-point line. Teams shoot 27.5% from three-point range against them, so there's going to be no clean looks from three-point range, which makes the low post play all the more impactful in this game. Middle Tennessee, about country average in terms of both their two-point shooting offense and their defense. They're headlined by Camardi Lance, being able to give you 13 points, 4.5 boards, shoots about 35% from three-point range. Only out of their top four scorers that shoots above 31.5% from the outside. Javon Garcia has been pretty versatile. He gives you about 3 boards, 3 assists, 12.5 points per game. And then Alec Oglesby is supposed to be a sharpshooter for the team, and boy has he been. 48% three-point shooter, 8.5 points per game, but really doesn't give you a whole heck of a lot of anything else. And then for Louisiana Tech, this team has been able to get good facilitation out of A.J. Bates, 6.3 assists, 12 points per game, shoots 41% for 3, and then DJ Turn It Up Dudley. He shoots 38.5% for 3, 12 points per contest, but Louisiana Tech outside the top 230 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Top 100 team in terms of generating turnovers themselves, so they've been able to do a nice job in terms of taking it back, and they've been a top 40 team as well with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I do think that defense is going to be able to keep them lively. You still have to have a lot of question marks with the offense, especially with them shooting 63.5%. The free throw line is outside the top 345 in all of college basketball, but I do think that Louisiana Tech going to be able to slow this game down. I don't think either team is hitting threes in this game, so I did set a line at a 7.5. At a 7 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it, mainly because I just have so many question marks with Louisiana Tech and that free throw shooting, and this is a Middle Tennessee team that it's one that is not going to be overly afraid to be able to put you on the free throw line as well, and with Middle Tennessee, they themselves shoot about 70% of the free throw line, but willing to lay up to 7 here with Middle Tennessee, and I'm going to be in on the underside by total at a 127.5, 859, 860 on the card. Oregon is on the road against Maryland. Maryland finds themselves as a home underdog here of 1.5 to 2.5 points, 150.5 to 151.5 is the total, and I said Oregon as a underdog of 3.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to take a shot here on Maryland on the money line. Oregon just continues to be sloppy with the ball as this team shoots 30.6% from three-point range at a road/neutral court venue, 228th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, they've dealt with some injuries, and Jackson Shellsad and Nate Biddle, they've been a nice 1-2 combo. These two guys combined for 31.7 points per game. Biddle is a true 7-footer that is shooting 36.5% from 3, 2.5 blocks, 6.5 rebounds per game. Shellsad, about 4.9 assists and 1.8 turnovers per game, and I mean, TK Simpkins has actually really improved his three-point shooting up to about 43.5% three-point shooting, 12.5 points per game. Very top-heavy team. Outside of your main, I will call it 6 guys, you don't get a lot of production outside that. This is an Oregon team that has been relatively country average in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, while being outside the top 240 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Maryland 77th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis in their home games, and for Maryland, they've really throttled down. They're playing at a rate of about 4.5 to 5 possessions per game fewer in their last 5 games. That's because they've got Solomon Washington back in the fold. He was one of the main guys that followed Buzz Williams on over from Texas A&M. He's become their top rebounder with 8.6 points, 8.4 rebounds per game. They've dealt with a little bit of injury to Farrell Payne when he's been out there. The Payne train has been able to give you about 17.5 points per game. Probably going to be out of the fold once again in this game, but David Hewitt, after he was a 20-point per game scorer a few seasons ago over at Northern Illinois, he's playing 13.5 points, 3 assists. He's shooting 45% from three-point range now. He is one of pretty much 2 of your top 6 scorers that shoot above 29% from three-point range, the other being Miles Rice. He dealt with a little bit of injury, but he's been pretty productive since coming back, shooting 40% for 3, 8.5 points, pair of assists per contest, but with this Maryland team, where they've really been getting blitzes from the outside. Teams are shooting about 37.5% from three-point range. I think that there should be some positive regression with that regard. And it's a Maryland team that has been able to do a pretty solid job on the offensive glass. Really, both of these teams have been able to. You've got a Maryland team that is about 100th in the country with rebounding 31.8% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Oregon has actually been 19th. They rebound 37.3% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, but Maryland's been a little bit better on the defensive glass. I do think that with Maryland being able to generate those turnovers, it helps you out with the under. You've got an Oregon team that is really not looking to push a ton of tempo. They're not fast. They're not slow in terms of total possessions per game, 213. So set a total of 143.5. Like the under, and I like Maryland here on the money line. 861, 862 on the card. UTEP is on the road against Missouri State. Missouri State is a 2.5 point favorite. 131.5 is the total. And I said Missouri State is a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. This is a UTEP team that is once again doing a really good job in terms of generating turnovers. Top 30 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and a little bit better at grabbing second chances. They're about 211th in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Doesn't sound amazing, but last year they were well outside the top 3 with that regard. But for this UTEP team, they do find themselves in a circumstance where they are very much gambling for turnovers, and when they don't get a turnover, everything turns very, very sour for them, as while they're grabbing some second and third chances, they're still well outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and they're just not really a good shooting team. This UTEP team is shooting 30.8% for three-point range. That's outside the top 300 of college basketball, hovering right around 300th in terms of their own three-point shooting percentage defense. So they have fallen outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're doing this while not necessarily pushing a lot of tempo. 324th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Missouri State last year was ghastly. In terms of taking care of the ball, they're more country average in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis this year, and they've really slowed themselves down. You've got a Missouri State team that's right now 310th of the country in terms of total possessions per game. Now for UTEP, it's a little bit of a top-heavy team where you've got a trio of double-figure scorers. Kasim Watson, 10.5 points, 4.3 rebounds per game. Elijah Jones has been that main scorer, shoots 31% for 3 with 14.5 points, 4.5 boards, and then one guy on the roster that gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game, Jamal West, 13 points, a steal, 6.5 rebounds. Doesn't necessarily shoot it well from 3, but he also gives you a little bit of a block per contest, so that's been able to help the team out a little bit. But for this Missouri State unit, they should see a little bit of positivity to the fact that they're shooting 28.5% from three-point range. They returned quite a few guys from the season ago, like a Saxon King, who is shooting right now with his 10 points per game only about 24.5% from 3. Last year, this guy was shooting more like 38.5% from 3. I don't think he gets back there, but I think he shoots better than what he is right now. They've dealt with a little bit of injury with Michael Osi-Benusu out for a little bit of time, but he's returned, and he's been able to give the team a combined 25 points in the last 2 games since he's returned, so should be all good to go here. He's able to give you 7 boards. He down low is able to give you a little bit of a steal per contest as well, and this has been a Missouri State team that has been pretty respectable. Top 175 team in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. Leaves something to be desired with their free throw shooting percentage, but with the way that UTEP is just not doing a great job in terms of guarding the three-point line, I do think that Missouri State heats up in this circumstance, and I do think that they find a way to get the job done. Semi line at 5.5. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with Missouri State, and on the under semi total at a 129.5. 863, 864 on the card. The Ohio State University is on the road against Rutgers. Rutgers is a home underdog of 8.5 to 9.5 points. 147.5 to 148.5 is the total. I semi total 144.5. I do like the under. You've got an Ohio State team that's playing fast, but it's not like they're playing aggressively fast. 121st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Rutgers about 284th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and what you're always going to find with Rutgers, they're a much better defensive team when they're at home rather than away from home. For this Rutgers team, overall they're about 137th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're giving up 19.6 points fewer per run on possessions at home rather than away from home. This is very much the norm for them. And then you've got an Ohio State team that's been respectable with their defense. 84th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. With Rutgers, they've been able to get a lot out of Mr. Dylan Grant. He's been their main scorer with about 14.5 points. Throws in their 6 boards, shoots 42% from 3. And Michael Davis also shoots about 41% from 3-point, only about 7.5 points per game, as the only guy outside of Grant that gives you over 7.6 points per game. Tariq Francis, 13.5 points. Steal per contest comes over from NJIT. And for Rutgers, what has really been the kryptonite of this defense has been giving it up from 3-point. Teams shoot 35.9% from 3 against them. That's just inside the top 300 in all of college basketball. And it's not a team that's really going to be forcing the issue with regards to turnovers. They're outside the top 185 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for Ohio State, they're really not grabbing a lot of second and third chances for themselves outside the top 190 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but they just hit their first shot, and they're very much looking to drive the ball down low. For Ohio State, top 15 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Now, you do have a pair of 3-point shooting dynamos and John Mobley Jr., 14.5 points, trio of assists, shoots 38.5% from 3, and Bruce Thornton, he shoots right around 44% from the outside, 21 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists. Do have to like what these guys guys bring to the table. And Christoph Tilley is a true 7-footer that's capable of popping up from 3. 6 boards, 13.5 points per game. He hasn't done a lot of that this season, though. And for Ohio State, they are outside the top 200 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, so should be able to get a lot of clean possessions for this Rutgers team. With Ohio State, they are outside the top 150 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. Do think that you get a little bit more of a slog of a game. I think that Rutgers gets their style on. I do think that the defense is able to hold up at home. Semi-total at 144.5. I like the under. And with Ohio State, made them an 8.5 point favorite, so at 9+, I'm going to be willing to take those points. We've got 865, 866 on the card. Stanford is going to be playing us Louisville. Louisville finds themselves as an 8.5 point road favorite. Total on this game, 157.5 to a 158.5. I set a total here of a 163.5. I like the over. Now you've got a Stanford team that all of a sudden has great defensive metrics because they played that slog of a game against Notre Dame. That was 47-40, where neither team could hit a shot to save their lives. Stanford is all of a sudden ascended to 68th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And Louisville, we all talk about the offense. How about them being 19th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis? But they are giving up 18.9 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. So I did set Stanford as a 7.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. One thing Stanford is doing a great job of, they're not allowing second chance opportunities. For Stanford, 25th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are only grabbing about 23.2% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, for Louisville, they've been able to do a pretty good job themselves in terms of not allowing those second chances. They're more around about 36th in the country with this regard, but we all know this with Louisville. They are going to be able to find a way to be able to score and pop it from 3-point range, 15th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They have been dealing with the injury to their main facilitator, Mikel Brown, who is averaging 16.5 points, 5 assists per game, but he wasn't really shooting it well from 3-point range. That means that out of your top 5 active, healthy players on this team, they all shoot at least 37.3% from 3-point range. Adrian Woolley has seen some more minutes, and he's a capable facilitator. Comes over from Kennesaw St. He's given the team about 10 points per contest. Ryan Conwell's been that main scorer, 19.5 points, 4.5 boards. He shoots 40% from 3. Isaac McNeely is able to shoot 40% from 3-point range, and you do have a pair of teams that are looking to play at a brisk pace, maybe not warp speed, but Louisville's certainly fast. They're about 58th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Stanford very much has slowed themselves down recently, but they're still about 158th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And again, the issue that you do have to have with the Stanford team has been the opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. They do give up a lot of open looks from 3-point range. They sort of sell out to be able to lock things down low, to be able to grab those offensive rebounds and what have you. But that said, with Stanford, even with that expose that they put on against Notre Dame defensively, they're 222nd in the country in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. And this is a Louisville team that they've been able to do a solid job. Allowing teams only shoot about 30.5% from 3, but Stanford is going to be looking to knife the ball a little bit more down low, and I do think that you're going to be able to get a good performance here out of the freshman and Abuka Okore, 21.5 points, about 4 boards, 3 assists per contest. For a Stanford team, that they're shooting about 34% from 3-point range. They've been rough with their interior offense. They're outside the top 250 in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, but Chisung Bokpara, 4 boards, about 15 points per game. He's been able to be very versatile. Additionally, you've been able to have Benny Geeler be able to Geeler done with about 11 points. He shoots 44.5% from 3-point range. And for the Stanford team, they've been a top 150 team in terms of percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, top 40 team in terms of being able to get to the free throw line, and they do generate turnovers. They're a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but I do think that Louisville does a nice job being able to take care of the ball. I do think that you're going to get a lot of scoring in this game, and I do think that the Stanford 3-point shooting defense is going to be a little bit of an issue. Set my line at 7.5 at 8+1. Take the points with Stanford. I like the over. Set my total 163.5, 867, 868 on the card. Nebraska plays those to Michigan State. Michigan State finds themselves as a underdog of 1.5 to 2.5 points. 145.5 is the total. I'm going to take the road underdog here of Michigan State. Set them as a 2-point favorite, so I like them on the money line. The Spartans defense just time and time again has been able to get the job done. Currently, they are 4th in the country in terms of overall rebound percentage, 5th in the country in terms of points per possession allowed away from home, and Nebraska's been playing with a little bit of fire. They're really inducing teams to shoot it from 3, with teams attempting 51.6% of the field goal attempts from 3-point range. That's the 4th highest rate in all of college basketball, and teams are only shooting 29.7% from 3. Now, part of it is obviously this is a Nebraska team that has been very good with their 3-point shooting defense, and they've got a lot of size around the perimeter. When you've got a guy like a Rink Mass, that certainly helps, as he and Price Sanford both are giving you 16.5 points per game. With Mass, he shoots 37.5% from 3, 6.8 rebounds, 3 assists per contest, and then Sanford has been shooting 38% from 3, supplies the team with about 5 rebounds per game as well. And Jamarcus Lawrence has been really good in the backcourt. He's pretty much replaced what Connor Esigian was given them before, and not having Connor Esigian, I feel like, has been an addition by subtraction, but that's at 9 points per contest. He's shooting 39.5% from 3-point range. But for this Michigan State team, we've seen them them shoot quite a bit better with regards to their three-point shooting than they did towards the beginning part of the season. First 5 games of the year, they were a little bit cold, but all of a sudden they've been able to get a lot of production out of Jackson Kaler, who's one of the best rebounders that you're going to find in all of college basketball, with about 9 boards per contest, 14 plus points, and he's been shooting well above 40% from 3. Michigan State currently shoots 45% from 3-point range away from home, 32% at home. I do think that that's going to be ironing out a little bit, but team as a whole has been a top 80 team with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. They've been able to get Colin Carr going with about 12 points, 5 rebounds per contest. You've been able to have Jeremy Fears be a little bit more of a fearsome shooter as well, shooting 35.5% from 3, 9.3 assists at 2.2 turnovers per game, 11.5 points per contest. It's a Michigan State team that really on defense doesn't force the issue. They are outside the top 230 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but you just don't get any clean looks whatsoever. They're in the top 85 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They don't allow a lot of second chances. I do think that discipline is just going to be enough to be able to win out here. Along Kurt Tang coming on strong. He's only given the team like 7 points per contest, but has been a nice 38.5% 3-point shooter, and I do think that you get a little bit of a slog of a game. You've got a Nebraska team hovering right around about 175th in terms of total possessions, where Michigan State outside the top 240, so set a total of 138. I like the under and Michigan State here on the money line. 869, 870 on the card. Seattle is on the road against Gonzaga, and Gonzaga is a favorite here of 23.5 points. So on this game, 151.5 to 152.5. Set my line at 23. So 23.5 does become my buy point on Seattle, and you've got a Seattle team that has been able to do a very rock solid job with their defense, and their 3-point shooting last year was outside the top 275 in all of college basketball. It's risen up quite a bit. They're now 126th in the country, while Gonzaga not necessarily shooting as much from 3. They're actually shooting now 38% from 3. That's the top 35 mark in all of college basketball, but if you look at the percentage of shots that come from 2-point range for Gonzaga, it's went way up from past years. For Gonzaga, right now they're actually 25th in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that come from inside the arc, but I do think that Seattle is going to do a better job of holding up than most teams. You've obviously got Graham Ike give you 7 plus rebounds, 14 plus points per contest, but by committee, this team has been pretty rock solid down low. Austin Morer has been able to give you 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Will Hembroit, he gives you nearly 3 blocks, 13.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. It's a Seattle team that is a top 55 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, top 70 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, while being able to generate darn near 15.5 turnovers per game. They've been a top 35 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and well, everyone always raves about the Gonzaga offense. For Gonzaga, they've actually been a little bit more efficient on the defensive side of things, really since that game against San Diego, but for Gonzaga right now, 12th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, so they've still been rock solid there with Adam Miller being able to shoot darn near 40% from 3, 9 points per contest, as your top scorers like Braden Huff and company have really not been the world's greatest 3-point shooters, but for Gonzaga, they're now 14th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. If you look at their home games and their home games only, number 1 with that regard, but you've got a Seattle team that's also 35th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You put them in a road/shoot score venue, this actually rises to the top 25. Now, I do think that they're going to have a tough time matching up with a Gonzaga team that's going to be looking to push tempo. They're a top 30 team in terms of total possessions per game, and going to be interesting to see John Sukkio of Seattle with his 11.5 points, 4 boards, going against his old team, and then Braden Maldonado, 40% 3-point shooter. He's been able to give you about 13 points per game, but Ty and Grant Foster, all sorts of versatility, 11.5 points, 5 boards. He's not necessarily shooting well from 3, but you've had Davis Fogel, when he's been out there, being able to give you about 7.5 points per contest. He's dealt with a little bit of injury, but did return in that game against Pepperdine for 15 points. He seems to be a little bit of an X factor. Did miss that game against San Diego, so if he's not out there, you're going to see a little bit more Mario Saint-Cyprien, who's been able to beat Supreme with his 8 points, shooting 50% from 3. I do think that Gonzaga are going to be able to get their offense going a little bit more, but I think that Seattle does just enough to hold in there. So my line at 23, so at 23.5 plus, won't take those points, and made a total of 153, so at 152.5 or less, like the over. 871, 872 on the card. It's West Virginia on the road facing off against Iowa State. Iowa State is a sizable favorite here. You're going to be laying with them 16.5 points. 140.5 is the total, and I said Iowa State is a 19.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I know that it's a big number, but this is an Iowa State team that has just been so supreme, and they're going up against a West Virginia team that they are going to be looking to slow things down. West Virginia, 338th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and I mean, credit to this West Virginia team, number 9 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That said, with this team, they're also giving up, I'm not even kidding when I say it, 31 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home. Meanwhile, you've got an Iowa State defense that is currently number 3 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and this is an Iowa State team that, in comparison to past years, they've been playing a little bit more quickly, about 134th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but something that has not taken a fall off their ability to be able to generate turnovers, as they are one of the best in all of college basketball in this regard. Iowa State currently checking in number 1 in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for West Virginia, they're very solid with this regard as well. They're number 47, and for West Virginia, they do have a 7-footer in Harlan Obiana, who's been able to do a very nice job in terms of locking things down low for this team, as he's been supplying with them with about 6.5 points, 5.8 rebounds per game. And by committee, this team has been solid with their rebounding. They were dealing with an injury to Chance Moore to begin the season, and he's probably going to be out once again. He's sort of been in and out. He was giving the team 12.5 points, 6 boards. We haven't seen him in about 2 weeks, though, and even if he does play, he's probably not going to be 100%, so that puts a little bit more on the plate of Brennan Lorient, who gives you about 10.5 points, 5.5 boards per contest, and Hunter Huff, he's had to be the main headline scorer, 17.5 points, shoots 42% from 3 for a West Virginia team that is shooting about 36% from the outside, but unlike in past years where Iowa State will gamble for turnovers, and if they don't get a turnover, they leave themselves a little bit vulnerable from the outside. This is an Iowa State team that's allowing teams to only shoot 31.9% from 3-pointers, while they've got Milan Mimosilovic shooting 53.8% from 3, 18 points per contest, and Joshua Jefferson, one of the most versatile players in the country, 18 points, 7 boards, 5 assists, steal and a half per contest. He shoots right around 42.5% from 3. Tamon Lipsby is generating about 2.5 steals per contest. You've got an Iowa State team that's just a tough customer on all fronts, and for Iowa State, much better on the glass than in past years. They become a top 45 team with regards to rebound percentage, and I do think that allows them to dominate this game. Set my line at 19.5. I'm willing to lay with Iowa State. I'm also going to be in on this total under as well, so by total 137.5. 873, 874 on the card. It's Washington State. They are going to be playing us to Loyola Marymount, and the Mount is a underdog of 1.5 points. 141.5 to 142.5 is the total, and I said Loyola Marymount has the 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. I think what is just going to be costly for this Washington State team is the sloppiness. They're outside the top 290 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and Washington State is actually slowing down quite a bit from past years. They're now about 290th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Loyola Marymount team that they're not really going to be pushing a lot of tempo either. This Loyola Marymount team, they're hovering more around about 211th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but Loyola Marymount has become a top 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're solid in terms of generating turnovers, about 123rd in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, Washington State not going to do any of that. They're about 316th in all of college basketball. And for Loyola Marymount, they dealt with a little bit of injury to Jan Vide, who was their top scorer when he went out of the fold. He's back. He and also Rodney Brown have been able to do a nice job in terms of supplying a combined 28 points per contest. Vide is right now shooting 54.5% for 3-point range. That should see a little bit of fall. And then you've got Rodney Brown. I think that his 41.4% 3-point shooting should be sustainable. 15 points, pair of assists per contest. And with Vide, 5 assists at 2.1 turnovers per game. It's a Marymount team that, to start with, they're about country average in terms of taking care of the ball. And if you do have a kryptonite with Loyola Marymount, it is the fact that they do give up a lot of second and third chances. They're outside the top 125 in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, and for Washington State, their main strength has been the fact that they don't give up a lot of second and third chances. Washington State right now third in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are only grabbing 20.1% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, Loyola Marymount allowing a little bit over 30% of misses to become an offensive rebound, but Washington State really doesn't haul in there a bunch of second and third chances themselves. They've got ace break glass in case of emergency, giving you 15.5 points, shoots 37.5% from 3, and this is a Washington State team that they typically come and go with their 3-point shooting, and it's been about country average at 33.9% with Washington State. They do leave themselves very vulnerable down low, even though they don't allow those second and third chances, though. They're outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and Loyola Marymount is going to be very content to be able to pile drive the ball down low, as this has been a team that's been a top 125 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. They've risen to the top 60 with their 3-point shooting percentage as well. I do think that Loyola Marymount finds a way to get the job done against a Washington State team I think is going to be very much hurt by the turnovers, and additionally for Loyola Marymount, top 50 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So set a total of 138.5. I like the under and Loyola Marymount here. Outright on the money line. 875, 876 on the card. Santa Clara is going to be playing us to Pepperdine. The Waves of Pepperdine are a 19.5 to a 20.5 point underdog. Total on this game 115.5 to 151.5. Made my line 18.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Pepperdine. I recognize that this Pepperdine team is outside the top 250 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, and this has been a Pepperdine team that has been right around about 260th in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so they're leaving something to be desired there, but they should be able to get some second chances of their own, as Santa Clara is just 240th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Now, Santa Clara also in the top 30 in terms of percentage of their own missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. They're grabbing darn near 14 offensive rebounds per game, and Christian Hammond has been able to step up in the backcourt. With Santa Clara, they've lost a lot of their guards from a season ago, but he and Elijah Mai are now combined for 32 points per contest. Mai shoots 40% for 3, 4.5 boards, a steal per contest. Hammond of 1.3 steals. He shoots 43.5% from 3-point range. And the one thing that Santa Clara is doing, unlike in past seasons, they're now really doing a nice job in terms of generating the turnovers. In terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they are 49th in all of college basketball. Certainly Pepperdine is not going to be doing as much of that. They're right around about 218th, and with Pepperdine, they've had a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball, even with bringing back a 6'10" 3-point shooter, Daniil Dosic. Dosic really not giving a lot of rebounding with his size, but he has been able to supply the seam with in that neighborhood about 11.5 points per contest for Pepperdine. They're outside the top 260 in terms of ball security with about 13 turnovers per game, but I do think that Aaron Clark and Javon Cooley are going to be able to give you quite a bit in the backcourt. Both are give you 13.3 points per game. Cooley shoots 36% from 3-point, pulls in their 5 rebounds per game. And Sile Phillips, he's a really versatile piece, 11.5 points, 5 assists, 6.3 rebounds per game. Pepperdine's defense feels like it's coming along for the ride. The offense, again, still leaving something to be desired outside the top 3 in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage, but Santa Clara, now country average team with regards to their own 3-point shooting, and Santa Clara has really sold themselves down from past years. Pepperdine is about 249th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Santa Clara is just a hair above that, 201st in the country. So do think that you get a little bit more of a control game here as a result. Set my line at 18.5, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Pepperdine. And made a total of 148.5, so the 150 plus also in on that under. 877, 878 on the card. Oregon State is going to be on the road against Pacific. Let me be specific, as Pacific is a 4.5 point favorite total on this game, 141.5 to 142.5, and with Pacific, I made them a 9.5 point favorite. So I'm going to be willing to lay that number. You've got a Pacific team that has been able to do a really good job of just owning things down low, 10th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're 89th in opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and Oregon State is a team that plays relatively slowly, 283rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Pacific 274th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but Oregon State not maximizing the most out of those, shall we say, slim amount of possessions. 305th in the country in terms of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, 263rd in terms of turnovers per possession. Now, overall, they're about 175th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, mainly because this has been a team that's been relatively solid with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. But for Oregon State, they do take quite a bit of a fall off with their 3-point shooting when they're away from home. With Oregon State, when they're out there in Corvallis, they shoot 37.8% from 3-point, down to 31% when they're away from home. I think that that's going to be big for a Pacific team that has been neither here nor there with regards to perimeter play, and they are turning the ball over quite a bit. They're outside the top 310 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but Elias Ralph is the best player in this game at 6'7". He's shooting 43% for 3, 17 points, 6.5 boards, steal, and a block per contest. CJ Wainwright, he's been able to shoot about 37% for 3, 13.5 points per game. Jaden Clayton, who comes over from Maine, he's been able to give you 7.5 points, 5.5 assists, 1.3 steals per contest. With Pacific, they're not really going to force a lot of turnovers, but they just play good, clean defense. And for Oregon State, right now, Josiah Lake, a guard, is your top rebounder for this team, despite the fact that you got 7-footer Noah Ammenhauser, they bring in R.A. Diaz-Graham. These have just been all flopperoonies, as right now for Lake, 14 points, 5 boards, 3.7 assists per game. He shoots 38.5% for 3. He's been solid. And then Des White shoots 37.5% from the outside, 11 points per contest. But I mean, you've got outside of Isaiah C., who gives you 9 points per game, a bunch of guys that they just ship in there like 4, 5, 6 points per game. They don't have guys that are really ascending. Yak as we deal with a little bit of an injury as well. And with this bunch in Oregon State, they're outside the top 190 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and with them just not grabbing any sort of second and third chances and giving up quite a few themselves, I think Pacific is able to control the tenor of this game. Semi-total at a 135.5. I'm in on the under, and with Pacific, I'm willing to lay up to 9 with them. 879, 880 on the card. It is Portland on the road against St. Mary's, and St. Mary's is a sizable favorite here of 22.5 points. Saw this game between 147.5, seeing now as high as a 150.5, and I do like that under. I saw my total at 144.5 with St. Mary's. This is still one of the most stout defenses they're going to find in all of college basketball. You had a Portland team that is one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball, 291st in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage, and in a road/neutral venue, they shoot 26.6% from 3-point. Now, Portland is looking to gun it. They are 53rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but they play at a rate of 5 possessions per game fewer in a road/neutral venue rather than at home. St. Mary's, once again, very slow and controlled. They're about 313th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they're not quite back to being number 1 in the country with regards to their overall rebound percentage, but this has still been one of the best rebounding teams in all of college basketball. And for Portland, their forte has been being able to do a nice job down low with their offense. They're a top 65 team in terms of their overall 2-point shooting percentage. Not going to be able to find as much of that with St. Mary's. St. Mary's is currently 13th in the country in terms of their overall rebound percentage. You've got Andrew McKeever, who's done a nice job with about 9.5 points, 9 rebounds per game. Paulius Marsukis, he throws in their 6+ boards. He's been able to supply 17+ points per game, and for St. Mary's, 44th in the country in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. Well, this Portland team, they have been getting gashed with regards to their 2-point shooting defense. They're about 254th in all of college basketball, and for St. Mary's, a significantly better 3-point shooting team when they've been at home rather than away from home as well. When St. Mary's has been away from home, they're shooting less than 32% from 3-point range as a collective, and it's not necessarily that they're like the most supreme 3-point shooting team in the world, but that goes up to about 38.3% from 3-point range at home. And Mikey Lewis is a really underrated shooter in general, give you about 14 points, 2.5 assists. He's been able to pop it at a clip of about 39.5% from 3-point range, and then Liam Campbell and Dylan Shaw, these two guys combined to shoot about 43% from 3-point range, 12.5 points per game out of both of them. Joshua Dent has been able to step up with 13 points per game, and right now for Portland, they're relying upon two freshmen to really headline things in Joel Foxwell along Timo George. They've combined for 26 points per game. With Foxwell, he shoots 36.5% from 37.5 assists per game, and then Timo George, he really doesn't give you anything from the outside, but about 5 boards per contest along with a block per game as well. But for this Portland team, even though they've been a top 150 team in terms of generating turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they themselves are outside the top 320 in terms of taking care of the ball. Combine that with their just rough 3-point shooting and St. Mary's being so set down low, I think that St. Mary's runs at highs with this game. Semi-total at 144.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 24 here with St. Mary's. 881, 882 on the card. It's San Diego, and they're going to be on the road facing off against San Francisco. San Francisco is a favorite of 11.5 to 10.5 points. 148.5 is the total. I think you've got a San Francisco treat. Not to trademark Rice-A-Roni, but that said, I said San Francisco as a 13.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. You've got a San Diego team that played really well a few days ago against Gonzaga, and they're more of a mid-tempo team. With San Diego, in terms of total possessions per game right now, they're checking in 193rd. Meanwhile, you got a San Francisco team that's really slowing things down to a crawl. They're down to about 315th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I just don't know who's going to be able to match up with Mookie Cook, as Mookie Cook has been really good coming over from Oregon after being a former top 50 recruit. 10 points, 5.5 boards from 3-point range. He's launching at a 42.5% clip, and then Tyrone Riley, he shoots 46.5% from 3-point range, going against a San Diego team that they are just getting absolutely plowed on the glass. Now, for San Diego, they've actually been relatively okay in terms of being able to guard the 3-point line. For San Diego, they're allowing teams to shoot about 33.5% from 3-point range in a road/neutral court venue. Teams are only shooting 27.7% from 3-point range against them, so I do think that you're going to get a little bit more of a slog of a game here as a result. I did set my total at 145.5. I'm going to be in on the under, but for San Francisco, you don't have a single guy in the roster that gives you over 5.5 rebounds per game, and for San Diego, you've got a team that's 333rd in the country in terms of overall rebound percentage. With San Francisco, they're checking in more around about 107th. They're not necessarily as supreme on the glass as they have been in the past, but David Futress, who missed a little bit of time, 13 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, and then you've been able to have Ryan Beasley do a nice job in the backcourt, give you about 3 assists, 13 points per game. The big thing for San Francisco is the fact that they need to generate more turnovers. They are outside the top 335 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis on defense, and that'll help out a San Diego team that has been a little bit sloppy with it outside the top 225 in terms of their ball security, and this has been a solid 3-point shooting team with Sonori Lane, Juan Sebastian Goracito combined for 22 points per game. Both shoot about 39.3% from 3-point, and then Tyler Johnson, do-it-all guy, 3.5 assists, 14 points. CLC shoots 37% from 3-point range, but again, with San Diego, their top rebounder is Vik Bosovic, who's been able to give you 3.8 rebounds per game. That is not great, to say the least. They're outside the top 310 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. I do think that San Francisco wins from within. I set my line at 13.5. I'm willing to lay it with the Dons, and I'm going to be in on the under, semi total 145.5. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 883, 884. Notre Dame is going to be on the road against Cal, and the Cal Golden Bears are 3.5 to 4.5 point favorites. So on this game, 138.5 to 139.5. I did set Cal as an 8.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with this California team. It is one that has been able to do a really good job in terms of their defense. They're a top 45 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and all of a sudden this Notre Dame team has been able to do a much better job with their defense because they played that 47-40 slog against Stanford. Prior to that slog, they were about 169th in the country in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, and now they have to go up against a Cal team that is shooting 39.2% from 3-point, 17th in the country, with Day-Day Ames being one of the better 3-point shooters in all of college basketball. 45% 3-point shooter, 17 points, 2.5 assists per game, and then really, with all of your top 4 scorers, they shoot at least 36.7% from 3. Justin Pippen, he's been able to give you 14.5 points, 4.3 assists per game. Chris Bell, about 15 points per game. John Camden, 14.5 points. He shoots 42% from 3-point range, and it's a California team that's been a top 75 team as well with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So they're doing a nice job holding it down inside, and for Notre Dame, they're right now adjusting to life, not having Marcus Burton out there, and this is a Notre Dame team that was playing very slow and controlled to start with. Meanwhile, it's a Cal team that is very mid-tempo, 174th in terms of total possessions per game. Notre Dame is 317th, and Notre Dame's still a very rock-solid 3-point shooting team. They shoot 37% from the outside. That's a top 65 mark in all of college basketball. You're going to have Jalen Harrelson having to headline things a little bit more, and he doesn't shoot it from 3, but gives you 14.5 points, 2.5 assists per game, and he gets other guys involved, like a Cole Kurta, who's been able to give you 8.5 points on 38% 3-point shooting. Brandon Shrewsbury shoots 46% from 3, 11.5 points per contest. Carson Tout has been big in terms of not allowing second and third chances with Mr. Carson Tout, 6.5 points, 10.1 rebounds per game, and one big thing that you've been able to get out of this Notre Dame team, they are not allowing second and third chances. Notre Dame overall is actually 29th in the country with regards to rebound percentage. Tout has been a big reason why, but in terms of percentage of opponents' missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, it's a Notre Dame team that's out number 4 in all of college basketball, only 20.3% of misses become an offensive rebound, and for Cal, to their credit, even though they don't really grab a lot of second and third chances, they've been pretty solid in terms of their defensive rebound percentage at about 105th in all of college basketball, so it's going to be a little bit more of a make it and take it sort of game, but with Notre Dame, I feel like their defensive numbers have just been very, very much warped with what we saw a few days ago, and this is not a team that's going to be forcing any sort of ball pressure whatsoever. Notre Dame 38th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis away from home. Meanwhile, you've got a Cal team that's about country average in terms of generating those turnovers, so semi-line at 8, I'm going to be willing to lay with Cal. Like the over as well, semi-total at 146, and now we eat the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-517, 306-518, you've got Wagner, and they're going to be on the road against Chicago St, and Chicago St does find themselves as a slim 1.5 point favorite in some spots. In other spots, a 1.5 point underdog. So last game, 146.5 to 147.5. I said Wagner as a 1.5 point favorite, so whether they be a pick'em or a 1 point favorite, I'd be willing to lay it. If I can get them as an underdog, I will take them outright on the money line. You do have 2 teams that are very, very rough in pretty much all facets of basketball. You've got a Wagner team that has been really speeding themselves up. They're a relatively mid-tempo. Donald Copeland being out of the fold and there being an interim coaching regime has led to this team really speeding up a little bit, and they've had Nick Jones do a nice job stepping up with about 15 points per contest, shoots 34.5% from 3, and Wagner does shoot 34% from 3. Sloppiness has been very big for them. They are outside the top 320 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and this is a Chicago State team that has honestly been okay in terms of generating turnovers. They're a top 155 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. The issue is they give the ball right back themselves. Chicago State well outside the top 330 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and with Chicago State about 229th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis with regards to their offense, and they're going to have a tough time matching up down low. As for this Wagner team, you've got Sam Smith along with Benny Basil, who've been able to combine for about 10.5 rebounds per game. Now, Smith has been dealing with a little bit of injury, probably going to be out of the fold once again for this team, but Jaden Baker with his 4.3 assists per game, I think that that's going to be able to win out in this spot, and it's a Wagner team that has been very good with regards to their interior defense. They've been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They really get cash from the outside, and it's a Chicago State team that is 353rd with their 3-point shooting percentage at 28.4%. With Chicago State, they are currently dead last in the country in terms of 2-point shooting percentage if you factor in D1 and non-D1 games, and they're in the bottom 10 with their own 2-point shooting percentage, as you've had Devell Cockrell III be able to supply the team with 14.5 points per game, dealt with a little bit of injury, and he's been able to give the offense a little bit of a spark. Marcus Ankersley, 13.5 points per game, but I just don't have anyone outside of Cockrell that shoots above 30% from 3. As a matter of fact, he's the only guy in the roster other than CJ Ray that shoots above 29% from 3-point range. This has been a Chicago State team that's just been dumped out on the glass outside the top 250 in terms of rebound percentage as well. With them just not being able to knock down shots, I do think that you get a little bit of a lower scoring game, and I do think that Wagner are going to get back to their roots, start to play a little bit more slowly. You've got a Chicago State team that's more around about 156th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I set a total here of a 147.5. This opened up more around about a 147.5, and I saw a 148 a little bit earlier. I was put between about a 146.5 to a 148. I honestly would take the 148 under rather than the 146.5 over. So right now, seeking out an under, and with Wagner, I'm going to be willing to lay up to a point with them. 306-519, 306-520. It is Long Island, and they're going to be playing us to Central Connecticut. Central Connecticut finds themselves as an underdog of 4.5 to 5 points. Dallas game 145.5, and I'm going to be in on this total over. I did set my total at a 146, as you've got an LIU team that has really been speeding opening themselves up this season. For LIU, in terms of total possessions per game, they're now checking in 69th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for Central Connecticut, this team has been one that has been playing at a little bit of a faster pace than a season ago. Not necessarily a team that's going to be getting completely out of sorts or anything like that, though, as they're 252nd in the country with this regard. But I'm going to be willing to take the points just because I believe that their defense is stronger, and Long Island is having a tough time taking care of the ball. This LIU team, in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, 324th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for Central Connecticut, they're 81st, and being able to take care of the ball, I think, is going to be very big in this ordeal. It's a Central Connecticut team that last year was one of the best three-point shooting defenses in all of college basketball, more around country average this year, but even though this team that really doesn't take away the ball, they're going to be able to do a nice job, in my opinion, inside. They've been a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, with Max Frazier being a guy that gives you about 11.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. James Jones doesn't necessarily give you a lot of scoring, but 7.4 boards and a block to go along with his 5.5 points per game. And Jaron Smith Jr. has become that go-to scorer. 20 points on 39.5% three-point shooting. And Central Connecticut shoots 38% from three-point range. That's a top 50 mark in all of college basketball. They don't necessarily shoot a lot of threes. They're in the bottom 35 in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three-point range. And they do face off against a Long Island team that has been really doing an okay job in terms of guarding the perimeter, about a top 225 team in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, and they themselves are a top 150 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but getting tattooed outside the top 280 in terms of opponent's two-point shooting percentage. But you do have a trio of guys that have really done a nice job in terms of giving you good offense. Greg Echo-Gordon, 15 points, pair of steals, 5 boards, shoots in the mid-30s from three. Jamal Fuller shooting 48% from three with 15.5 points per game, and then Malachi Davis is your top scorer, 16 points, 3 assists, steal and half per contest, only shoots about 30% from three-point range, but Shadrach Lassou, after last year, he was a good rebounder. He's regressed a little bit there. Isaiah Miranda just has been a big giant disappointment, former top 200 recruit that stands 7 feet tall and he gives you 2 rebounds per game. Just not cutting it there, and I do think that Central Connecticut going to be able to do a nice job of holding in this game, but I do think that the three-point shooting and late game fouling is going to do just enough for the over, so set my total 146 here at the 145.5, like the over, and with Central Connecticut, 4.5 plus 1, take those points. 306-521, 306-522. It's Lemoyne on the road, facing off against St. Francis, Pennsylvania. St. Francis is an underdog of 6.5 points, 155.5 is the total. I set Lemoyne as a 6-point favorite, so here at 6.5 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points with St. Francis. Now, for St. Francis, they're a rough team, outside the top 300 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, but you also have a Lemoyne team that is doing a terrible job in terms of taking care of the ball, 298th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. You do have a Lemoyne team that has been a pretty solid three-point shooting team, and Shiloh Jackson should be the top rebounder in this game. He's been able to supply the team with 8 plus rebounds, 16 plus points per game, and Lemoyne, they do shoot 36.6% from three-point range as a collective. This goes down to 35% away from home, but still a very solid percentage. Meanwhile, St. Francis, Pennsylvania, they're just not really shooting well from three. They are shooting about 31.5% from the outside, but I do like what Sky Wicks is able to bring to the table, as Wicks has been really that do-it-all guy. He was really good at Inkerna Word a few seasons ago. 19 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists. He's shooting 38% from three-point range. And then Paris Papadopoulos has been able to give you about 8 points. He shoots in the mid-30s from three. Zion Russell has been able to give you about 11.5 points per contest with Papadopoulos. He's been dealing with injury throughout much of the season, but should probably be good to go in this game after he missed like the first 5 or 6 games of the season. But for the St. Francis, Pennsylvania team, they certainly have been getting plowed on the glass outside the top 250 with regards to rebound percentage, and they're outside the top 300 in terms of both their own two-point shooting percentage and their opponent's two-point shooting percentage. But for Lemoyne, even though they've been a top 75 team in terms of opponent's two-point shooting percentage, they are, out of 365 Division I teams, if you include D1 and non-D1 results, 365th in opponent's three-point shooting percentage at 40.1%. I do think that St. Francis is going to be able to exploit that, be able to find some good looks from three. Now, you've had Trent Mascara along with Dang Garang be able to do a nice job combining for 27.5 points per game, with Mascara shoots 40% from three-point range, and Tennessee Rainwater, I'm not even kidding when I say he shoots 87.5% from three-point range. Certainly going to see some regression there, but a bit of versatility at 6'6", 7 points, 3 rebounds per game. They've dealt with the injury to Amitri Moss, so that's been hurting them quite a bit. And I do think that allows the St. Francis, Pennsylvania team to do just enough to hold in there. Set my line at 6.5, 6.5 plus, going to be one, take the points. Set my total at a 156, so at a 155.5, I do like the over. 306-523, 306-524. New Haven is on the road against Stonehill. Stonehill, a 2.5 point favorite, total escape, 125.5 to 126.5. Set a total of a 128.5. I do like the over. Now, you've got two teams that are not pushing tempo whatsoever. You've got a Stonehill team that, in terms of total possessions per game, they are currently about 218th, and New Haven is 360th, and New Haven is outside the top 340 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They just don't have the athletes really to be able to match up down low, and that's the biggest thing that you find with teams that go from the non-Division I ranks up to the Division I level. They do have Jabari Fitzpatrick, who's done a nice job as actually suffer 2 steals, 13 points, about 5 rebounds per game, and then Andre Pasha has been able to give you 9.5 points, 5.5 boards. Each throws in there a steal per contest, so you've got versatility, but this team is also shooting 28.8% from three-point range, outside the top 330 nationally with that regard, and they've been outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Now, Stonehill has had a massive fall off with their offense. They're well outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. All stems back to the Will Batchelor injury. He was their number 2 scorer through the first 3 games of the season. Has not been seen in the team's last 10 games, but I think the Sacred Heart transfer is going to be able to step up here, as Raymond Espinal Guzman has been able to supply about 9 points, 7 rebounds per game, and he should be able to win that battle down low. And then Ruud Van Tutich, he's been able to give you about 7.5 rebounds, 8 points per game. It's a Stonehill team that has been a top 175 team in terms of rebound percentage. They've been very lucky with teams only shooting 60.5% free throw line. That's the lowest free throw shooting percentage of any team in all of college basketball. And for Stonehill, their 3-point shooting at right around 34% is still relatively solid, as Herman Kofi shoots 41% per 3 with about 15 points per game. You've got back from a season ago Chad Stinson. He hasn't been able to give you anything from the outside but 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. And Devontae Hackett, he's been able to hack it with about 10 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. And I do think that this team is going to be able to do a very rock solid job on the inside. I do think that you're going to see a little bit of positive regression with the opponent's free throw shooting percentage. And the big thing for this Stonehill team is being able to generate a few more turnovers. They've been outside the top 350 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. So a New Hampshire team that has been having a tough time outside the top 225 in terms of ball security, they should be able to get a few more clean possessions. So I'm going to be in on the over at a 128.5 is where I set my total. And with Stonehill, I do think that they find a way to win from within. Set them as 4.5 point favorites. So won't lay that number. 306-525, 306-526. Lamar is on the road against McNeese. McNeese is a sizable favorite here of 14.5 to 15.5 points. 141.5 to 142.5 is the total. And with McNeese, set them as a 15.5 point favorite. So won't lay up to 15 with them. You've got a Lamar team that is looking to play at a relatively controlled pace in terms of total possessions per game, checking in about 262nd in college basketball. Meanwhile, for McNeese, they're more around about 200th, as McNeese has sped up a little bit from a season ago, but they're still a top 5 team in the country in terms of turnover force on a per possession basis, especially at home. Larry Johnson, Tyshawn Archie, they've done a nice job combining for 29.8 points per game, and with Archie, he shoots 38.5% from 3-point range, 2.5 assists, 1.7 steals per game, and then Gwari Duel, he's not necessarily the most supreme scorer. He only shoots about 29% from 3, but about 9.5 points, 2.2 steals, 4.5 assists, a little bit over 3 rebounds per game, and this has been a McNeese team that has been very good in terms of giving themselves second chances as well. Top 75 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. This despite the fact that they don't have a single guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. They just do it all by collective. Javon Garcia, who's back from a season ago, he's done a nice job giving the team 12 points on 40% 3-point shooting as well, and this is a Lamar bunch that I do think that they are going to be able to have a little bit of versatility to help them hang in there with Andrew Holyfield, a 6'10", little bit of a combo player, being able to give you about 13 points, 5.5 boards, a steal, and 2.2 blocks per contest. So they're a little bit more solid on the inside rather than the outside, as Lamar is outside the top 275 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. And it's a Lamar team that they themselves have been a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Lamar is going to have perhaps a little bit of a leg up on the glass. This team has been nice in terms of both not allowing a lot of second and third chances and being able to provide themselves with some second chance opportunities. Lamar is generating an offensive rebound on about 32.5% of their misses. That's 82nd in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, McNeese is right around about 67th, but at home they rebound 39.5% of their misses as an offensive rebound. So makes it very interesting with regards to this total. I do think that Lamar is going to have big time ball control issues. This has been a Lamar team that has been turning the ball over about 12 times per game, and even though you do have someone like a Rob Lee in the backcourt who's been able to give you about 15 points, he is able to shoot about 39% from 3-point range. Cody Penbaker shoots 40% from 3, supplies the team with 8.5 points per game. I think that they're going to have a tough time getting good looks against a McNeese team that has been a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So by a total at a 137.5, like the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 15 with McNeese. And wrap things up with 306-527, 306-528. Fairleigh Dickinson hopes to be fairly priced as they are going to be on the road against Mercyhurst. Mercyhurst is a mid-sized favorite here of 6.5 points. So on this game, 135.5 to 136.5. Set a total of a 137.5. I do like the over. Now, Fairleigh Dickinson has really slowed themselves down for past years. Typically, this is a team that's playing at warp speed, and currently they're 257th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. That doesn't mean that the defense is any better. For Fairleigh Dickinson, 333rd in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 340th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So one thing that Fairleigh Dickinson is doing is they're grabbing a few more second and third chances, who are 9th in the country in terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, because unlike in past years, years where they were always one of the shortest teams in all of college basketball. They added some size. You've got 7-foot Surreal Martinoff, who's been able to give you 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. And down low, he's also been able to supply a little bit under a block per contest as well. You've been able to have Eric Parnell be able to step up, shoot about 37% for three, 11.5 points per game. And you've had 5.5 rebounds per game as well out of Tashad Jackson, comes over from VMI, 7.5 points per game. But 3-point shooting just is out there, unlike in past years for Fairleigh Dickinson. They're outside the top 250 with their 31.9% 3-point shooting. And you've got a Mercyhurst team that has been able to do a pretty solid job with regards to their defense at home. For Mercyhurst, they are 31st in turnovers forced on a per possession basis at home, and they're only allowing teams to shoot 26.63% from 3-point range. And with Fairleigh Dickinson still launching a lot of threes, even though they added a lot of size, they're attempting over 50% of their shots from 3-point range, 11th highest mark in all of college basketball. That should allow this Mercyhurst team to really be able to hold them down. And Mercyhurst is a very slow and controlled team. Mercyhurst, in terms of total possessions per game, 354th in all of college basketball. And you've got Bernie Blunt, who I think is going to be the best scorer in this game. Shoots 40% from 3, 16 points per contest. Jake Laleman has been able to give you about 12.5 points. He shoots 37.5% from distance as well. Mercyhurst overall, they only shoot about 31.5% from 3-point range as a collective, but this has been a unit that has been much better at home rather than away from home. At home, this rises up to 39.5% 3-point shooting, and they shoot less than 27% from 3-point range in a roadside shoot score venue. So a Mercyhurst team that's not going to give themselves a lot of second and third chances. They are outside the top 275 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, but they've been a top 225 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, not allowing a lot of second and third chances. And they do have a pair of guys in Kadir Martin along with Mykolas Ivanauskis, who've been able to combine for 12.1 rebounds. Martin is able to give you 2.2 blocks per game. Ivanauskis at 6'7", is able to pop a few threes, only at about a 29% clip, but does give them a little bit of versatility. And additionally, you've been able to get about 3 assists per game out of Christian Gamble, who doesn't give you too much scoring with about 3.5 points per game, but flows good, clean offense. And for Mercyhurst, they should do a nice job winning this turnover battle. And I do think that Fairleigh Dickinson is going to be able to find a way to get a little bit more scoring. I think that they crank up the tempo just a skoch. So somebody told 137.5. I like the over and I'm going to lay with Mercyhurst. And that'll wrap things up for the Friday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Riley Frain of Mid-Major Madness for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast with picks and analysis on every game every day, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.